Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. We are really excited to have Julia Sanders and America Marvel with us today to talk about the historicity of the temple ceremony. They have poured their soul into this amazing PowerPoint, and I'm really excited to have them on our show and to share that with you today. Please remember that if you are watching us live on YouTube, we are not airing any of these in a particular order. So when you go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to your podcasts, things are going to be released there in the chronological order that most things occur in the temple. So if you have any questions about any of that, please feel free to give us a shout out in the comments today. We will be interacting with our audience as we chat with you. We're really excited about that. Or you can always email us at daisygirlcommunications.com or daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. Our goal today, while yes, we are revealing a lot of the history and some of the things that would make it an active participating member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormons, very uncomfortable. Our goal is to be respectful of their religious practices. And instead of just bagging on the practice, we're really hoping today to give you a historical look of where things came from. Remember that our intent is to help educate our audience so that if you are practicing or participating, or if you are not, or if you're just curious, we want you to understand where these practices came from, because chances are an active member of the church does not know the things that we are teaching you today. I know that I didn't. Alex, let's bring Mason into the show really quickly. Mason, did you know about any of the background and the removal of these things before your temple experience, or before you exited Mormonism?
No, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about the connections with Masonry. I didn't know anything about the penalties that were there and then removed. I did know that they used to be live sessions, meaning they actually had real people, not just a video, and experienced that once in the Salt Lake Temple. But I didn't know any of that kind of stuff. And my guess would be, even as a bishop, I didn't know that kind of stuff. So it's not something that they talk about. It's certainly it's not just the ceremonies that are secret or sacred. It's everything connected with the ceremonies that are secret, sacred.
I touched something, Alex. Sorry, I took Mason off the screen. That was not my intent. Let me move away from my keyboard here. Sorry. So yeah,
I felt that.
Sorry, Mason. Let me just take you off. So no, for me, I had heard once, I'm going to say about, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that there were some connections to Masonry. So I knew that. And I knew about the throat slashing and the bowel slashing in 2004, actually, after my marital affair. Mason, you were in Iraq, and I started doing Bible study with this really kind of fringy Baptist group. They were not your normal Baptist. One of my best friends in high school was Baptist. So when I was doing some of these, this research, I was like, oh, Baptists are going to be great, because my friend was Baptist and her church community had welcomed me in. And I ended up with a really fringy Baptist group that were doing Bible study in my home. And they gave me a book that talked about some of it. And then I just it was one of those thought-stopping things. So let's go ahead and bring America and Julia on. They can share their experiences about when they learned this.
Hi.
Hello. Please, Julia and America, before we get started and jump into this, I would love for you to tell our audience where they can learn more about you, what the projects are that you're working on, so that way they can support you in your work. And then, just take it away and boss Alex around. You are completely welcome to just tell Alex next slide or whatever you need. That's just how we roll here. Our audience has only seen Alex for about 3 seconds. And I think it was last week's show, he accidentally put himself up on the screen. So other than that, Alex is the super secret, amazing human behind the scenes. So go ahead, take it away.
But he does have feelings. Don't forget that he has feelings.
Oh yeah. Well, I think of him as like the neighbor and Tim the Toolman. He's just like
He makes us look and sound amazing. So
that's so good.
yeah.
Yeah. So I have we do a podcast together. It's just Analyzing Mormonism, and you can find us on YouTube. I think we're also on Spotify. I need to figure out the Google podcast, but anyway, so I have a TikTok and Instagram, and then my shorts that I do on YouTube. So yeah, and then I have a website that I try to keep updated. I haven't been as thorough, but I have a lot more. I need to put all these things that we're about to talk about today into the website, so that'll be fun. So
the website's really awesome because she's got references and sources for everything that she talks about.
Awesome. Yeah. That's great. And what about your publishing company? Because I know that you've been working as you're getting ready for your publishing company. How's that going right now?
Yeah, so we've been, so it's called Adina Publishers. We've been releasing reformatted and republished old Mormon history books that we find interesting. So far, we've got out Annaliza's wife number 19. She was actually not the 19th wife of Brigham Young, but she's got a really interesting story. She was his wife, but probably like the 50-somethingth.
Yeah, she was one of his later wives, but she thought she was the 19th wife. And we also have William Smith on Mormonism. We have John D. Lee's Mormonism Unveiled coming out,
which is about the Mountain Meadow massacres. Super interesting. He is biased, but his view is very, very.
Well, everybody's biased, right?
We Lees tend to be biased, and we really like to make sure that everybody believes our story is the only right one. So for more information on how the Lees like to do that, you can read my book. There it is. My book, Trauma Bonded, because I am Sarah Lee Westbrook. Keep going. Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee.
Yeah. My dad named me after the pie lady, but he gave me an H. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, I was named after actually an ancestor and not the country, but you wouldn't know by looking at me. Anyway, then we're releasing our first LGBTQ book that's not a Mormon book next month. It's called Outsider by Jade Dupreez. We're very proud of it.
She's from New Zealand, so that's
awesome.
Very excited. It's so good. It's
awesome. And can we get all of these books on Amazon or wherever books are sold?
Yeah, the easiest way to find it is if you go to Amazon and type in Adina Publishers, which is EDINA, and then all of our books should come up. For some reason, we can't figure out the algorithm.
Yeah, we're not pros. You can also find all these links at adinapublishers.com, and I believe there's a link on your website, analyzingmormonism.com.
Awesome.
And there's pre-orders available for Outsider, and then all of our other Mormon history books are available there. And if you have one that you just really want to see in print that is not easy to get, and it's over 70 years since the author died, we can reprint one.
Yeah, we have to make sure they're in the public domain or else they're still copyrighted. So, yeah.
So anyway, that's what we're working on.
You said adinapublishers.com?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. So are we ready to get into this temple stuff?
Yes.
All right. Let's go. Let's do it, girls.
Okay.
Get it started.
Do you have the slideshow? There we go. Yeah, so I had some trouble titling this, but we're calling it the evolution of the temple ceremony because we're talking mainly about the changes that are happening in the temple. And what I did is I tried to go work our way backwards. So I want to show what's going on in the temple now, and then kind of work our way back to its origins. So that's how I've kind of set things up.
Oh wait, it's more shocking when you get to the end instead of it's just boring now.
Yeah.
So and I just told Alex in the where everybody can see it, feel free to remove Mason and I so that way we can just spotlight America and Julia rather than the private chat. So listeners, you get a little behind the scenes actions there. All righty, go ahead.
Okay, so Alex, if we can move to the next slide. I don't know if I have control of that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is the initiatory. And so one thing that I didn't talk about here is that the temple ceremony first started before the temple was even finished and before Joseph Smith was even a master mason. So it happened in 1836 is when the first sort of washings and anointings happened, which is what the initiatory is. And one thing that I didn't talk about here, but some of the first recollections of this is with Oliver Cowdery and Martin Harris, and they bathe first in cinnamon whiskey. And so that was
spicy.
kind of interesting.
Whoa. Why cinnamon whiskey? Wait a minute. No, like Fireball is amazing. I love that stuff. When I was cruising, when I was cruising, they did oh shit, what's it? It was like Not Your Grandma's French Toast shots. And that was my first experience with Fireball. Y'all, it's delicious.
I don't know if we've had that.
We have not had that. We are
Okay.
I
still new to alcohol.
I knew that they bathed you, but I didn't realize in cinnamon whiskey for reals.
Yeah, and it was just the men at first. It was the women weren't. The women weren't involved. Yeah. So that's super interesting. Yeah. So we can go to the next slide and go more into it. Okay. So I gave you a little bit of a teaser because I didn't have a slide for that one. But the washings and anointings today, if you go through the temple, I want to talk about the clothing really quick. So right today, you just wear a normal, like what she's wearing, just a regular temple dress or Mason. For the male side, I think it's just a white suit and tie. Is that correct?
No suit, just a white shirt, tie, and pants. There's no jacket unless you're a worker.
Okay, yeah. So just white clothes, and then they go from wearing their normal Sunday attire, and then they just change into this dress, and then they go through this little washing and anointing, which we'll get into more. But I just thought that was interesting. The last time I went through the temple, this is what I wore, and I thought that was kind of nice because you don't have to. I guess we'll go through these next slides. So
Alex, I think I actually have that exact dress.
Oh,
I feel like
beautiful.
Yeah, it's Mason. I feel like maybe I should wear it for our next live show. Keep going.
Okay, so after 2005, the temple patrons, so the members that go to the temple, were instructed to put on their garments beneath this what's called a shield during the initiatory, and the shield is just sort of a white poncho. And so, like that's how I was when I was.
Me too.
When I got initiated, I don't know how to say that, but I wore my garments underneath, and they don't tell you anything about the garments. They just say go purchase them and put them on. And so it was really, really weird for me to put them on, and then you put the white poncho on you, and then you go through this little ceremony. So.
Right, I'm actually going to pause you for a minute, Julia. Alex, do you happen to have the pictures? And you can just send me, a thing in the private chat here. Do you happen to have the pictures that we used with the initiatory with MJ? Because we could actually pull those up. We have pictures of those ponchos.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, because when Mason and I went through, I went through for the first time in 1999, and I was naked underneath it. So I did not get at least I had my underwear already on. I was naked with the ladies who were super sweet ladies, but like reaching under the poncho to touch me in the spots with water and oil.
Can we talk about that? Can we go to the next slide? I want to hear more about that because that's super interesting. Yeah, so Alex, if you go to the next slide. So this is a picture. This is what this is on the website LDS Discussions, which is a really great website. This is the illustration that is there. So
and this is actually one of the ones that we used last or 2 weeks ago. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So prior to 2005, the temple patrons were required to wear a shield, and they had no clothing underneath. And that you said that was your experience.
Yeah. And so I went through, I think it was like May 30th, May 29th, something. You have to go look up. My new name was Phoebe. And so whatever the day that correlates, like if you get on the Oracle or whatever. So I went through like May 29th, 30th, 31st around there, in 1999. And I was butt ass naked underneath the white sheet. So basically it's like a white bed sheet that's been sewn into this poncho thing, but it was open on the sides. And the thing that was really uncomfortable for me is, we focus so much on sexual purity and all these other things. So my whole life, nobody, unless I'm married to them, is supposed to touch me underneath my clothing. And this one is a good representation here because the sleeves kind of hang a little bit longer than the one from the Mormon Discussions. This, I would say, is more representative of what I wore. And then it's, completely open. But the thing that was really weird to me is that, from the time I'm itty bitty, I'm being told that I'm not sexually pure. I'm not, quote unquote, worthy to even be in the temple if I'm being touched underneath my clothing, period. Like even in a non-sexual way, I was not allowed to wear the midriff shirt. So like, I grew up, my high school years are in the late 90s. So the midriff shirts, the kind of the higher waisted pants, that was my generation. I mean, I got in trouble for anybody seeing my belly button. And yes, my parents were very extreme, but that was actually, I grew up in Snowflake, Arizona. Snowflake, Arizona is like, when I was there, is like over 87% active LDS, right? So it was just such a huge Mormon community, and it was the norm. Don't touch somebody under their clothing. Like my shorts went to my knees. My sleeves had to cover what would eventually be the garment. And so my very first experience in the temple, and I've already been through, but by the way, let me back up here. I've already been through a disciplinary council once because I had sex with my boyfriend when I was 16. And so I got, chastised, shamed, wasn't allowed to take sacrament, so on and so forth. So then when I get to the temple and they are touching me under my clothing, I
Sorry.
have no idea what that was, but
Sometimes
awesome.
It's a motorcycle.
motorcycles just like to be really loud, right?
Okay, so you've got some hogs heading down your road. Got it. So for me, it was really interesting that the very first thing I'm doing inside the temple, other than the baptisms for the dead, which Mason and I will talk about here in a very near future date, is that I've got old ladies literally reaching under that shield to touch me, on my breastbone, and then above my navel, and then below my navel, but not my pubic bone, and they're touching, and they're not like feeling me up or anything. They've got like a drop of water on their finger and they do it, and then they do it again with oil, whatever. But to have anybody underneath that after all these years of nobody is supposed to be there but like the doctor and your husband, that's it. So it just threw me for a loop. And I'd had some sexual trauma. It was not good. Not good.
I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like,
yeah. Mason, what was it like for you? Because we didn't talk about what it's like for the man. Like, what was your initiatory like? Did you get this fancy dress thing too?
Oh yeah, you wear the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. It was weird, but that was about it. Like I've talked with you many times about, I'm not a very self-aware person, like paying attention to the details and going, oh my gosh, this is creepy, wouldn't have occurred to me. It was weird. But even then, it wasn't like they didn't slide their hands in and actually touch your belly button or anything like that. It was more of a side thing. They kind of touched you on the side of your pelvis. You weren't anywhere near anything that, would be inappropriate. The breastbone, they just kind of touched you right up here on the top. They're not trying to get down in anywhere or anything like that. So it was weird. It was a little awkward, but that's about all for me.
Yeah, well, and nobody was trying to touch me,
right?
In my private areas, not at all. It was just weird to have anybody putting their hand under me as part of a religious not under me, under my clothing as part of a religious ceremony.
Yeah, for sure.
And luckily for us, by the time we went through, I went through in 2013. This was not a thing. I would have been so freaked out if I had to be naked. Yeah, that would like woo. That I would have been like.
Yeah, well, and I was also menstruating, which made it even worse. So, like in my book, when you read my book, you find, I was bleeding all the time. I had a lot of problems with like bleeding way too much. And so I was bleeding and it didn't matter. Like I was not allowed to wear anything to catch the blood. And I told them, I was like, hey, I'm bleeding. And they actually gave me a temple shield that already had a little bit of the brown blood stains.
Oh my gosh.
So it was almost like, oh, well, because you're menstruating, let's go ahead and put you in one that has already.
I'm going to get her the period one.
Yeah. So mine wasn't even fully white. Maybe that means that when they pronounced me clean, I wasn't actually clean because my shield was definitely stained crimson red at that point.
And I think a lot of the bother for me is that, of course, a lot of this has changed, as you just talked about. Right now, you just wear the garment. You don't symbolically get it put on. But even when I went through, this is back in 96, they talk about, this is a symbolic thing and blah, blah, blah. But it's just interesting that you can, as a religion, put so many people in a really awkward position. And awkward is probably just the least word that you could use. I think most people felt a little awkward or probably everybody felt a little bit awkward. Most people felt more than that. But then to now be in this situation where they've changed all of that, they've taken the awkward out, but they haven't acknowledged any of the fact that it was awkward. We're not talking about is, oh, a lot of people complained about that. Well, let's change it, but we'll change it as if it was always this way. And that's really what bothers me, is not so much that it's changed. I think the changes are good, but the fact that you've changed them in such a way as if to say it's always been that way. What are you even talking about? What, that kind of thing is like gaslighting stuff. Yeah. Gaslighting stuff. So
That's
Alrighty. So if you have more questions about what actually happens in the initiatory, please feel free to go back and watch our show on the initiatory. So turn the time back over to you, Julia. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
For me,
and you, America.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For me, the initiatory was actually the best and like most spiritual part of the whole temple experience, because the endowment is just so boring. But the initiatory was like, I was so amazed by the fact that there was a woman giving me this blessing, and like it was like very personal, and it was like the most wonderful part. I can't imagine how that would feel if you also were naked. Like what? I don't know. But anyway.
You're not the first person to say that. Like, even when we talked about it with MJ, she kind of talked about like that was her favorite part. So you're not the first person to talk about that. Some people can completely overcome, even when it was more revealing, can completely overcome that part and just feel, I'm not a woman, but to walk into the temple and to have a woman put her hands on your head, or your woman doing the ordinance, has to feel pretty amazing. So I can see that as being like the overriding thing. Like you walk away and maybe later deal with some of the awkward or weird, but at the moment it's like, oh my gosh, there's a woman putting her hands on my head.
Yeah.
There's hope for us.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a high, like, oh, this is the most spiritual experience I've ever had. I didn't even know that God approved of this kind of a thing.
Right.
And it's so beautiful. But then you walk away from it later going, wait, if we can have the priesthood in the temple, why can't we have the priesthood anywhere else?
Camel's nose right there.
Yeah. So Mace. So yeah, I was going to add to that. I was going to say, once I got past the icky touching, it's like, because I'm definitely not afraid of my body showing, or I've never struggled with that. I'm a pretty confident human in my body. For me, it was just so disconcerting at the mixed messages. But when I went back and did initiatories again, I thought that the blessings were absolutely beautiful. And yeah, like you, Marvel, or America, I definitely had I mean, we can call you Marvel, like your female Captain America going on over there.
Whenever you like.
Captain Marvel. Yeah. So, but I agree with you. It was like, wait a minute, why do the women get to do this here, but nowhere else? Like, what's the problem with that? Yeah. So, really quickly, before we move to the next piece, I just want to say, hey, listeners, there are a lot of you joining us live today. And so if you have questions or comments or things that you would like for us to address, please do. You're also invited to ask a specific question to a specific guest. Like, I think I speak for all of us. All four of us are very comfortable answering any question that you might have. So please just get into the comments and leave a comment. And we are doing our best to preview all of the platforms, so that way we can respond to you in real time.
Totally.
All right, go ahead, Julie in America.
Yeah. Yes, if you go to the next slide, Alex. So in the 1800s, so of course I don't have a visual for this, but in the 1800s, originally...
I'm disappointed in that, by the way. You can't put something like completely naked on the board and not have pictures to go along.
Bold and underlined. We just need you to envision.
Yeah, bold and underlined. I don't know what to do with that.
All right, so yeah, this is our image from our last show. This is what it used to look like, yeah.
This is from the 1920s in the Salt Lake Temple, and I have the same picture later in my slide. So yeah, in the early initiatory and the washing and anointings, you were completely naked. So I'm glad at least that they added a shield. I'm glad at least they added the garments under the shield, and I'm glad that today you're in a full dress. Again, Mason, like you said, I wish that they would acknowledge, hey, I'm sorry that we had it this way, that we've made these changes, and we apologize, and this is how we're going forward, like how it is going forward. So like, I wish that was a thing, but
One more thing that just comes to mind for me on that one is that if you look at this progression, you can only imagine, and I'm maybe we have some evidence of this, but you can imagine that the reasons those changes were made, if historically they did things the same way they do things now, they got complaints. They got people saying, this isn't okay. We can't be doing this anymore. This isn't right. So the church changes the way they do things because the people say we can't do it this way. But the church always talks about how God told us to do this. But the actual progression of changes doesn't reflect that.
I think that's true.
Came to my head, just wanted to throw that out there.
I think that's true with almost every change that the church has experienced.
Absolutely.
And that's like everything, not just the temple. Yeah.
Was it
I
Elder
wonder.
Holland who did this thing?
Oh yeah, Elder Holland, in one of his speeches, he talks about how he's like, the world moves here, and then the church moves here, and then the world moves here, and then he's like, then we're I think he sort of tipped his hand in that way.
By a few years later, we're where the world is, had been, and then he's
proud of it.
Stop myself, and we're like, oh yeah, because you're revealing you're moving with the world, not like be progressive for once.
Right. Well, especially if God truly is at the head of this church, you'd think he would know.
Yeah, or say
ahead of time.
In 100 years, actually, Black people will be a part of the priesthood. So why don't we just go ahead and do that ahead of time?
Well, no. We had to wait for, equal rights and all the Civil War stuff to come down. And then the church is like, no, we don't want to do that. No, we don't want to do that. Oh, we better do that because people are mad at us.
It's the same with everything, right? Same with polygamy, right? They didn't give up polygamy until when?
1920s.
Until the United States
but
government.
Even if you look at legally, they didn't give up polygamy until 1890, but that happened after Congress.
Until the 1920s.
They did, but that's not my point.
Right,
but they didn't say we're going to stop until Congress passed a law that disincorporated the church.
Yeah,
Congress said, look, we've spent 10 years fighting you. We've spent 10 years fighting you on this. You're not giving up. You're done. We will tear your organization apart if you don't give it up. So finally the church said, well, we can't fight that. So I guess God says
how much. Sorry, Alex told me in the beginning, don't talk over people, and here I am talking over people.
It's hard not to.
It is so well, and Mason and I, that's just how we communicate at home. I wonder how long the church is going to continue to commit tax fraud before that happens again. Just saying.
Well, I don't know if you talk about this in these slides, but you recently found out that, the prayer roll. Do you talk about this?
I don't have this in the slides, but in the temple, there's a prayer roll, which I think it's actually a beautiful thing. So, and even in our church that we attend, we light candles for people. But there's a prayer roll, but in which if somebody needs help, or if somebody's moving, or if one of your kids is losing their faith in the gospel, you write down their name and they set it on the altar, and then they pray just in general for these people on the prayer roll. But before that, in the early church history, they would do that for the sake of cursing people.
As well as.
So they would write down the presidents of the church that they didn't like, that didn't support their stances, and so
in polygamy.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of presidents that were on that list of cursing. So that was interesting.
So then my question is, did it go into a little black bag so that way you have like the curse bag, because the
white bag,
the blessings go are the white little baggie on the temple altar. Do they have it like a different color to be like, all right, Lord, bless the names in here and curse the names in here, because God probably couldn't keep it separate unless we put it in a different bag.
God's not going to be able to tell. You're going to have to separate it so God understands.
I did not know that. Keep going.
Yes, I think this is reflective. I think that is reflected in the oath of vengeance, which we'll talk about later. So just keep that in mind with the oath of vengeance. So
all right. Spoiler alert. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. So then we're going to get into the washing part of the initiatory. So that was what we wear during this initiatory. Is either we were dressed, shield with garments,
or just in the buff,
yeah. So you can go to the next one. Okay, so the washing today, which the washing and anointing was my favorite part as well. I didn't know this part was going to happen, but so today during the washing, they get their fingers, they just put a drop of water and they put it on your forehead, and they're like, now you're pronounced clean. And I didn't know that was a thing, because when you're baptized at age 8, you're pronounced clean, And so that
you had to be wholly submerged. So this is very reminiscent of like a Catholic baptism.
Yeah, which I guess I hadn't thought about in that way.
Yeah, this is totally deja vu from when we did this. Like the fact they're saying this is like a christening. Why can't? Yep.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, but I just love that part because I didn't know that I was going to be washed clean or pronounced clean, and I got endowed before my mission, and so that was fun for me. But yeah, so that was how they did. That's how they do it now. And then if you go to the next slide.
Comment?
Oh, sure. Did you have
because you brought up baptism. So in baptism, you are cleansed from your own sins. If you remember this one, it says that I pronounce you clean from the blood and sins of this generation. So it's not exactly the same thing. Yeah, just in the interest of full disclosure, it's a similar thing, but it's not the same thing.
Right.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you show this.
I'm full of interesting points.
So you showed this already. This is a bathtub from the Salt Lake Temple in 1912, and so they would bring the patrons in. They would wash them fully in this tub, and so like people don't have that idea when they think of the washing and anointings, but that's super interesting.
So wait, was this tub ever full of the cinnamon whiskey? Because I mean,
I don't think so. I think that was an early thing before Brigham Young even took over.
I mean,
as far as I can read,
I feel a little gypped. I mean, I think that they really need to bring the whiskey washing back. Like in the little horn thingy or whatever it is, like that's on the drip, like just have the fire whiskey on drip to okay, keep going. I'm missing out.
We're gonna wash you, and you're like, can you just give me a minute?
Here's what I brought my shot glass. Hey, y'all, I literally had peach whiskey for breakfast this morning.
I heard you only had whiskey. I brought some bubbles. Is that gonna be okay?
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. Our producer just reminded me that you can't put certain bits in fire or in cinnamon whiskey. It's just not very comfortable.
Yeah, people ask me that. I made a TikTok about this, and like I can't imagine bathing your whole body in cinnamon whiskey feeling good.
And maybe that's why women tend to it, because like it would be a lot more invasive. Anyway, let's
wait. One thing that I do want to say that I think is interesting is that during these cinnamon whiskey baths, a lot of these early temple ceremonies did not take place in the temple because the temple wasn't finished till later.
Right.
So it's interesting to me that all these temple ordinances can be done outside of the temple and still be valid. So in reality, the members of the church don't actually need temples, but the church still continues to make them for various reasons. But I just thought that was really interesting that we really don't need the temple because even with the endowments, they did those in the Masonic Hall and then before the temple was finished. So I can't really think of any of them.
Washing and anointing anywhere there's a bathtub, apparently.
Yeah, and I think they did baptisms for the dead outside of the temple as well.
They did, yes. I remember that piece of history. So, okay, my last fire whiskey comment, and then I promise I will get off the whiskey. I love I love cinnamon whiskey. Is how when you're in like nutrition or dietary classes and they talk about getting enough water to drink because it's basically like washing your insides out. I would be up for that type of cinnamon whiskey cleansing. Just saying. Just drink it. Okay, keep going. It's delicious. Just sip on it. It's so good.
Okay, so yeah, if you'll go to the next slide. So this is another tub. This is just a tub that I took from a historical website of where they talk about the bathtubs, the history of bathtubs. So this is just a bathtub that's also in the 1800s. And so the patrons would climb into a large tub, and the temple worker would wash them. And one thing that I thought was interesting that I just read yesterday is in Heber C. Kimball's journal, he says that they bought stoves to heat up the water and to put and that they had purchased 2 new troughs, and they were large enough that 3 men could be washed at the same time. And so I thought that was really
sexy.
Rub-a-dub-dub, 3 men in a tub.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I'm not sure that he's saying that they were actually washed at the same time or that it was just big enough to have it happen. But I thought that was interesting.
Let's leave that up to Mason to decide. What do you think?
Mason's like, Mason's more of a one male, one female at a time kind of a person. I mean, it sounds hot. I have several clients and friends.
I'm going to keep my thoughts to myself.
That's no fun.
So
you just need to put these tubs in the new swingers clubs that are cropping up all over the state of Utah right now.
I wonder if they'd be interested in cinnamon whiskey.
I mean, I guess I can enjoy this. I can enjoy the thought of that happening in the other half of the temple. I can do that.
There you go.
Right. Well, and one of the things, so we've talked about this before. So Alex is reminding me, Alex says in Japan, I'm going to also say in Korea, in a lot of cultures, communal bathing is
Normal.
very cultural. It's a very special thing. You know, one of the best experiences that I had around the time I was verbally, like out loud, leaving the Mormon church was I went to a Korean bathhouse and spa, so King's Spa in Dallas, and they had the male and the female communal washrooms where you are naked. And so I don't necessarily think that communal bathing is a bad thing. Not at all. When you know what's going to happen, when you consent, like it's not like I am dragging somebody into the communal bathtubs without telling them what's going to happen and what the rules are. Like, you know, for example, at the King's Spa, and I've only been to the one in Dallas. Mason and I need to go to the one in Chicago because it's closer. And my bestie moved all the way up to Washington, the stupid brat. I love you, Danny. But she did. She moved away from me, so now I'm mad at her. But we need to go to the one in Chicago. But like there's signs everywhere. They're like no cell phones past this point. If you even have a cell phone, they'll press charges and whatnot. But the people that are entering know what they're going for. And I think that that's really the biggest issue with the temple stuff is, you know, and maybe Julia, you can speak to this. Did the members know what was going to happen before they got there? Or was it like, hey, I want this temple experience, and then they're doing this communal washing? Because I know lots of people who are like, yeah, Sarah, you're really brave. I could never do that. Whereas other people are like, hey, let's go hang out on the nude beaches in Europe. And that's an amazing experience for them. And so really for me, it comes, and we can joke about it and whatnot. We say that Mormonism doesn't focus on sex in the temple. And I would say, not true. It's subtle, but it's definitely there, but also informed consent. So.
Yeah. So the early church members did not know what they were getting into. So yeah, there was early exposés of like Analyza, Mary Eddy Smith that talk about these, and they were very surprised that these things were happening. So I think you're right. Some of these things are okay in Mormonism. Some of the things like having more than one partner, I think those things can be fine as long as you have consent of all the parties. So
right, that like, is historically not what was happening in Mormonism.
Right. So like, and we've talked about this on the show before, like consensual non-monogamy can work. I've got clients that I've worked through. They can have absolutely beautiful connective relationships. The difference between consensual non-monogamy and Joseph Smith's polygamy was every party is supposed to know what's going on, and not the nitty-gritty details, but there's consent, there's knowledge beforehand. So, you know, like when you read into, oh goodness, what is her name? Mason, can you look up the book Polysecure? I've forgotten her name. Polysecure or Polywise. It's on our Audible, actually. She talks about the only difference between like ethical non-monogamy and cheating is awareness. It's the honesty up front that this is what you're doing.
Jessica Fern.
Thank you, Jessica Fern. I'm sorry, Julia, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think certain rules that the couples follow are also really important. So not just awareness, but following those specific rules.
Right.
And Joseph would set himself rules and then break all of them. So he wasn't even doing that either.
Right. Consensual
it also only went one way.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, and in Joseph Smith's time, it was assignment behind people's backs, super secret. But consensual non-monogamy works when all of the parties are able to consent and honor boundaries and have really strong communication skills and transparency. Right. Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole show just on that. Right. And we probably will. Actually coming up this year, we'll be talking a little bit more about that. But yeah, I do find it very interesting that what we talk about in the temple isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like there's nothing in the temple that's quote unquote bad or dangerous if you know what you're doing. And I think that understanding the history behind it is very beneficial for that. So.
I'll disagree with you, but I'll bring that up later because I think there is a part that I would disagree, that I don't think anyone should be asked to do this in the temple, but we can talk about that and discuss.
Right, well, and I'm talking about like, so like the throat, the old signs and stuff. No, but like I'm talking about, yeah. Okay. We'll get to it. Keep going.
Yeah, that's what, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, Alex. Okay. So we don't have to go through all of her experience, but Analyza talks about hers. She was one of the first exposés on the temple and in detail.
This is the wife number 19 book that we have re-released.
Well,
Yeah,
and
so
if you look right in the center, so like you've got head to my feet, like wash me from my head to my feet, repeating certain formulae to the effect that I was washed clean from the blood of this generation. Way to go, Mason. Gold star
Yeah.
for you. Okay,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah,
know my
she was-
stuff.
Yeah, so she just says that she was washed in a large tub. That Miss Eliza R. Snow washed her with 3 other women and 2 or 3 other women in attendance. And then she says she was washed from her head to her feet. And then she just kind of goes through her experience. And if you want to switch to the next slide, and she also says she was wiped dry. So do you want to go to the next one?
Next slide, Alex. There we go.
Okay, so this is Mary Eddy Smith. She wrote an expose as well, and she was a member for 15 years. And then so she talks about hers. Here we were undressed and washed in a large tub of warm water by women who were ordained to the office. So she's just sharing her experience as well.
And the next.
Well, and I think that's interesting. Like, how would it have been different if they could have chosen, who it was that was going to wash?
Yeah, kind of like when you're going to be baptized and you're like, I want my father to baptize me or whatever.
Like a relative.
Like knowing that this is going to be a spiritual experience that you and this other person that you trust will be participating in. And like, I found it to be really fascinating that Eliza R. Snow is the one who is doing the washing and anointing of Eliza, sorry.
Yeah.
Just because I have theories. I have theories that she's not straight.
I don't know if we can go into that, but
Awesome.
yeah. Okay, so
We
so now
actually
we're going to talk
talked about that the last time you guys were here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's because
I
it's
remember.
my favorite theory.
Oh,
So-
okay.
So, I feel like that's really off topic, but D. Michael Quinn wrote a book about the 19th century study of the queerness in Mormonism, and he talks about the theory that Eliza R. Snow was not straight. So if you want to learn more, you can go there and learn more about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to talk
Awesome.
about the anointing part of the initiatory. So Alex, if you want to go to the next slide. So today during the anointing, a temple worker puts a drop of oil on the head of the patron, and the temple worker then blesses the patron, and soon another worker joins and blesses her also. And I think it's the same with the men, except for men are blessing you. So
It is. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so it's
the same.
okay, yeah, so it's just a single drop. And for me, when I got anointed or whatever, they do it on with this cow horn. I don't know if it's a cow horn specifically, but the olden times it was a cow horn too. I don't know I think yours might have been a different experience.
I don't remember a cow horn, but it was a long time ago. So
Yeah.
did you
My
guys
s-
remember a cow horn?
Yeah, my sister actually, when we got to the celestial room, that was one of her questions was what was that? And I don't remember if it was called a cow horn, but it was some sort of a trumpeting,
Right.
Mhm.
something that had been flipped upside down that but I don't remember what they had called it. But yes, I think it is some type of a cow horn.
Yeah, something like that. So I just say cow horn because in the early, like in Heber C. Kimball's journal and stuff like that, they say cow horn specifically. So, but I just remember I don't know if it was real, if it was just the shape of it, but I just thought that was really interesting. Like I'm sure there's some symbolism there. I didn't research.
Yeah,
what it was.
the temple, the celestial room, of course, we've talked about in the celestial room, you're allowed to ask questions, but not really. And so my sister was asking about the symbolism, and it had to do something with the trumpeting in the Old Testament to call people in. Mason, do you know what story that's from? It was specific. I just
No.
remember it being specific to the Old Testament when she answered my sister's question. And that was the first realization I had of why are we basically our last step to get into heaven is revisiting and reviving Old Testament things that were supposed to be done away with Christ. So
That's
yeah.
interesting.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Do you want to read this one?
Sure. In the late 1800s, the temple patrons were required to bring their own bottles of the best olive oil, save some money.
For the temple.
So after being dried from their washing, the temple patrons were literally anointed with oil on nearly every part of their naked body at this time.
Yeah, so one thing that I think we'll show her story a little bit, but analyze it. Oh, they also say that these were perfumed with lavender. So I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure how you perfume oil, but they talk about that.
You just infuse it. You just stick lavender right into it and bottle it up and let it sit. And my oil's coming from Greece. Just saying.
Nice.
So you would have been bringing your own best oil because you're like, I have this great lavender oil from Greece, and that's what I want to be anointed with from my head to my toes.
Well, and I mean,
With
from
the
a health
accent as well, yeah.
perspective,
With the accent.
the accent's not
Smart.
Greek, but it is beautiful.
I didn't say it was Greek.
No, I mean, olive oil on your body and your hair is actually really healthy. It's a good health practice. It would be expensive though.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if you go to the next slide, so this is, are you going to read all of this?
I don't know if we need to read it.
Well, you pause to read. So they anoint her head, her forehead, her eyes, her ears, her mouth, her tongue, her arms, her hands, just like everything with oil. Does it talk about, do you talk about this?
I can't remember if it's in here.
So she talks about, Analyza Webb talks about in the book how she was dripping with oil, like dripping into her eyes. So that she was, during the endowment, she was just like having to wipe it out of her face because she couldn't even see from the oil dripping into her face.
She said she felt nauseous. And so the one thing that I wanted to add too is Analyza was, I think, 17 when she went through the temple, and she was very sick. In fact, I think she was like close to death. And her family thought that the leaders said that if she went through the temple and got endowed, she would be healed. And so they took this sick girl and they put her through all this stuff. And of course she's experiencing this oil while she's really sick. So I wonder if that also helped her, because she said she couldn't even be around olive oil after this because it was so bad for her.
Well, I mean, I'm
so I
not
wonder
a
if that had to
fan
do
of
with-
how it smells. Like I wouldn't want it all over my body either, but
even when you're sick, that can also influence that too. So
right, if you're talking about later not even being able to like be around olive oil, that's a trauma response. That it was so gross, like I just couldn't do it anymore. That's definitely a trauma response. So I actually, America, if you wouldn't mind, or Julia, if you wouldn't mind actually reading this, because this will be a podcast later. I would love for the listeners to hear this, mostly because it's similar to what they said the last time I went through. And, as we talked about, the blessings and stuff are really beautiful. It's not necessarily the blessings that are problematic as much as it is.
And we can reiterate that this was our favorite part. Like you've said this, and this is mine as well. So like you said, it's not a bad thing. I just wish that they would give more informed consent or have started from the beginning of not making it quite this.
Or you ask questions afterward that are actually allowed to be answered. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read it. Sister, I anoint your head that I may be prepared for that crown of glory awaiting you as a faithful saint and the fruitful wife of a priest of the Lord. Sorry, that's annoying to me. You must be a wife of the priest of the Lord. Okay. Your forehead that your brain may be quick of discernment, your eyes that they may be quick to perceive the truth and to avoid the snares of your enemy, your ears that they may be quick to hear the word of the Lord, your mouth that you may with wisdom speak the words of eternal life, and show forth the praise of the immortal gods. Your tongue to pronounce the true name which will admit you hereafter behind the veil, and by which you will be known in the celestial kingdom. I anoint your arms to labor in the cause of righteousness, and your hands to be strong in building up the kingdom of God by all manner of profitable works.
I think if you go to the next slide, she might continue this list. I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay.
I anoint your breasts that you may prove a fruitful vine to nourish a strong race of swift witnesses, earnest in the defense of Zion. Your body to present it an acceptable tabernacle when you come to pass behind the veil. Your loins that you may bring forth a numerous race to crown you with eternal glory and strengthen the heavenly kingdom of your husband, your master and crown in the Lord. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, as you're reading this, America, I'm like, oh wait, what I thought was really beautiful is actually really annoying me, mostly because they're blessing you with strength and health and all these things, but then in the next breath, it's either for your husband or for God or for the church. So
no offense, Mason.
Yeah. Keep going.
Oh, I would like to point out that I completely agree, but this is not what they say anymore. So your experience in the initiatory was completely different because while there's some similarities, it is not like this.
Right.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the blessings given to the women in the initiatory are exactly the same as the blessings given to the men.
That's
so it's completely different now.
I would say I'd want to look into that because I specifically remember because I was struggling with infertility, right, Mason, for us. And so
Yeah.
when they would bless my loins or my womb or whatever, it was that I could raise up seed unto
That's
God
true,
or
'cause
something
that's
like
They
that.
wouldn't. They definitely blessed the womb, and that would not have been in the male part of it. So that would be an interesting thing to compare the two of them.
So yeah, it would be interesting. So go ahead. And in fact, while you guys keep reading, I'm going to actually look it up and see if I can find it. So go ahead, keep going.
To continue on, I anoint your knees on which to prostrate yourself and humbly receive the truth from God's holy priesthood, your feet to run swiftly in the ways of righteousness and stand firm upon the appointed places. And now I pronounce your body an acceptable temple for the indwelling of the Holy Spirit.
And if you want to go to the next slide, I can't remember what's there. Okay, yeah. So yeah, this is where she talks about, do you want to read this one too? So this is, she talks about her experience with all of this.
So she says, as may be imagined, I was literally besmeared with oil from my head to my feet. I breathed it, smelled it, tasted it. It ran into my eyes and made them smart fearfully and dripped in any but an agreeable manner from my hair. I was fairly saturated with it, was cognizant of nothing else, and I was so nauseated from it that I could scarcely go on with the ceremonies. I got a distaste for it then that I have never got over, and to this day, even the sight of it makes me ill.
Even the sight of it, not even the smell, just the sight of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's trauma right there.
Well, that's what we're about. That's what we're about in Mormonism is trauma and blessings.
Yeah. So I found it for the men. The washing doesn't seem to have, so just to kind of follow up on that question, the washing does not, okay, there's the anointing. Let me get back up to the washing. All right, brother, whatever your name is, having authority, I wash you preparatory to receiving your anointings for and in behalf of, name the person that's dead, who is dead, that you may become clean from the blood and sins of this generation. I wash your head, that your brain and your intellect may be clear and active, your ears, that you may hear the word of the Lord, your eyes, that you may see clearly and discern between truth and error, your nose, that you may smell, your lips, that you may never speak guile, your neck, that it may bear up your head properly, your shoulders, that they may bear the burdens that shall be placed thereon, your back, that there may be marrow in the bones and in the spine, your breasts, that it may be a receptacle of pure and virtuous principles, your vitals and bowels, that they may be healthy and strong and perform their proper functions, your arms and hand, that they may be strong and wield the sword of justice in defense of truth and virtue, your loins, that you may be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, that you might have joy and rejoicing in your posterity, your legs and feet, that you might run and not be weary and not faint. And then for the anointing, I anoint you preparatory to becoming a king and a priest unto the Most High God, hereafter to rule and reign in the house of Israel forever. And then it is basically the exact same thing. So I'm wondering now, something that we'll have to follow up with later is, have those words changed between when, like, like the other changes, like from when I was going through in 99 and you guys later, and to what it is now? Because I very much remember them blessing my womb to be fruitful, to bring up seed to my husband and to the Lord.
I recall that as well, but maybe it was changed to the loins because it mentioned the loins, and so maybe that's similar with the men and women. I can't remember. It's been a while.
I'm looking at the one for the women right now, and it's exactly the same thing that you just read. So I can't speak to 1999 when you went through, Sarah, but
yeah. So let's follow up on that.
Yeah.
We'll follow up on that. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so if you want to switch to the next one. Okay, so now we're going to go into the endowment. So one of the things, let me just run through.
So I'm going to pause you really quick. Sure. If we have any questions from our listeners about anything with the initiatory, go ahead and shoot that at us. And we'll definitely get those answered. All right, go ahead, Julia.
I was just going to say, and you may have already talked about this, or this is probably going to be talked about later with your episode with initiatory. So they put you in a square room and they kind of have it separated off with curtains. And so one of them is just a waiting spot, and then you move on, and then that's where they put the drop of water, and then you move on again, and that's where they anoint your head, and then you move on again, and that's where they bless. I think just overall your garments. I think that's kind of how they initiate you into wearing your garments. So it's those 4 little sections, and then you're done, and then you go into this endowment ceremony if you are going through for yourself. So that's what we're going to talk about. So
after putting clothes on, right?
Yeah, after getting dressed. Well, like nowadays you're just in your temple dress, so you just stay in the same clothes. So just grab your little pouch.
Oh, I'm hearing us here. Hang on, let me mute us. So I actually just got on. Oh goodness, I can totally hear myself twice here. Okay, just let me turn my volume down. So we actually have a question. So Alex, one of the questions you and I had asked is, are we seeing all of the comments from listeners as they're coming up? And I'm going to say, no, we're not. So I have a couple of people here. Hi, Teresa Dunback. Great to have you here. Love you too, friend. But I've got a question from Gary who says, wondering more info on original initiatory and the first main parts and who did them and initial garments. If Jesus showed them the temple ceremony, why the changes? And so I'm going to say that question to me seems a lot like, wondering more info on original initiatory. So yeah, like what were the words originally and then what are they now? And if Jesus revealed that to them, why would it change so substantially? So like what you just showed. So Alex, can you go back to like, I think it's 2 slides. Go backwards. Yeah, one more. So yeah, so in this with Anne Eliza Webb's anointing, and then what Mason and I just read off of now, it's obviously changed. So yeah, Gary, I think that you bring up a really good point in if this was supposed to be directly from God, like Joseph Smith is the one that I'm guessing, right, who revealed the temple ceremony. Because yeah, go ahead, Julia.
I just want to add. So with the early ones where they did the cinnamon baths and stuff like that in the 1830s. So I don't know that we have specifically the exact wording for that. They just said we got it. We were washed and anointed. I don't know that there are records for that in the early times. But then a lot of what we have comes out after Joseph Smith's death of what was actually said. So I don't know if this is going to answer the question, but so with Joseph Smith, he started with the washing and anointing, and he did the signs and tokens and things like that. I think that the story, and this was what we're going to talk about with the endowment, I think the drama of Adam and Eve was maybe not Joseph. And there's a chance that it could have started with Joseph, but I think that was mostly Brigham. He was really into plays and things like that, and he got to be in one in Nauvoo. Pizarro. So yeah, I don't know if that one was Joseph, but everything else came from Joseph. So all the secret things or the important things came from Joseph. So as far as the wording from that and how that's changed, I don't know from the 1830s. But yes, what you just read and what we're seeing here with Annalisa I think she got endowed in the 60s. I can't remember what years she got endowed. She was 17, so it was pretty early on. So yeah, it's changed significantly. And like you said, if Jesus was the one or God's the one that revealed these, why are they different now? Mm-hmm. So that's a good question. Yeah.
If God is
it sounds almost rhetorical to me too, right? If Jesus is the one that did this, why are we changing it? And you mentioned that, we don't have records of it for some of what happened initially, which is fine. But if you just look back over our lifetimes, it's changed frequently enough that it's obvious. It would seem unlikely that it's changed as many times as it has over the last 40 years and not changed at all before that. And we do have some records to show that it has. So like when you can ask that question, if God gave us this as it was supposed to be, and Joseph Smith said, this should never change. Immediately you're left with the issue and the question of, something's not right here. Yeah, something's not right.
Yeah.
Part of that question, I think, involved the garments, which I have a slide for later. So I'll just hold off on that question until that comes up later.
Yeah, we've got another couple, Alex. I was actually just texting you, Alex, if you could check the Sarah Westbrook business profile, because what it looks like we're getting in the comments, at least on my end, is I can see. So for our listeners and viewers that are on the Daisy Girl Communications side, those are the ones that are coming up. But I'm not seeing the questions from the Sarah Westbrook or the Sarah Lee Westbrook, and I'm not seeing the questions from the Unpacking Mormonism group or from the Analyzing Mormonism group. So Julie in America, if you want to check yours and see if you can see any comments that maybe we've got some viewer questions, let's go ahead and maybe get those answered. I've got one question from Shannon who says, were their clothes on? And so in the washing and anointing section, you were just covered in the sheet. In the old days, no, you were completely butt-ass naked. Then when I went through, I was naked under the sheet. And now you're allowed to wear the magic underwear, the Mormon garment underneath the shield. So now It is. And that was changed in, I believe, the early 2000s. Is that when it was changed? Ladies, Julie, you would know better
2000s.
when. Later 2000s?
Later, like this was within the last probably 10 years, if I remember correctly.
Of the clothing. I'm sorry, what was the specific question?
So the question is, when did they make the change so that you could wear your garments under the shield for the initiatory?
So I know prior to 2005, you were naked. And then just shortly after that, you were allowed to wear the garments. And then just recently, and even in my, I don't know how to say that. I haven't been, because I was endowed in 2012, and then I was excommunicated in 2021. So then they knew you were allowed to just wear your full dress with your garments
like
underneath.
2021-ish.
So yeah, like
since then.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't remember on that date, but yeah, in the 2005, you were allowed to wear garments underneath. So
okay. So that's one. And then hello, Hassler from South Africa. Welcome to the show. Julie in America, did you see any questions or comments on your
so this is a technical issue. I think it's saying that because it's made for kids that we cannot have comments, and I don't know why it's set to made for kids, but it just won't accept comments.
Got it. Okay. And so what I'm seeing here too is that if you are on the Sarah Westbrook professional business site, so the name difference is Sarah Westbrook, we cannot seem to access those comments. So if you want to hop onto the Daisy Girl Communications side instead of the Sarah Westbrook side, you should be able to chime those in. And I'm going to actually leave my phone on to watch them from the Sarah Lee Westbrook site. So
did you see somebody was from South Africa?
Yes, we have Hassler is watching us from South Africa.
That is so cool. So my grandparents are from South Africa, and the missionaries met them there, and then they moved to Salt Lake. So I just think that's really cool. Like someday I go back or want to go there. So
yeah, I had the great opportunity recently to interview for my book, actually, with oh goodness, and I cannot. Okay, yes, Amy Polander. This is the right one. Hello, Amy. Yes, Shannon, I can see you now. All right, so many of our listeners have switched over, so now we are seeing your comments in our feed. So thank you. We will get this fixed for future shows because I don't want to miss your comments. So I did a recent interview, and oh goodness, I can't remember what it was, but it was in South Africa, and since then, like my book has exploded in sales in South Africa since that podcast. So it's been really exciting. Yeah. So all right, keep going. Let's go ahead and move on to the endowment.
I think Alex will need to skip over a little bit past the endowment one.
There we go.
One more. Okay, so I don't know how I don't go into a lot of details on this. I don't say the secret signs and tokens. I do go into the penalties a little bit, just because a lot of those have been pulled. But so the endowment is a performance or a drama, and it's now a film in most cases. I don't know that they still do live performances in St. George and Salt Lake. I don't know that for sure.
When I lived there, and 4 years ago, they still did live.
So this dramatization is of the story of the creation and the fall of Adam and Eve, and so that's overall what the endowment is. And then throughout that, you get the signs and tokens and the penalties. I guess
that have nothing to do with anything. 0 cents.
Yeah.
Right, next.
Was that snark?
Just
Felt
a
like
little
snark.
bit. It was
Felt like snark.
That's why we get along so well. Because
that's what I bring to the table. She brings the history. I bring the snark. We're a good team.
So Alex, you can go to the next one.
Sounds about par for us too. She brings the intelligence. I bring the sarcasm, and it works for us.
Okay, so at first I want to talk about the cast of this drama. So Alex, if you want to go to the next one. So in the temple cast today, so the film or cast consists of the following characters. There's Elohim, which is another name for God or Heavenly Father. And then you have Jehovah and Jesus, Michael and Adam, Peter, James, and John, and then Eve, and then you have Lucifer. I think he's called Lucifer in the movie. Is he called Satan? He's Lucifer.
Oh, he's called Lucifer in the movie.
So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have these 8 characters here. And so if you go to the next slide. So this I didn't know until in my beginnings of my deconstruction. So in the temple cast in before 1990, there was another character called the preacher, and kind of funny saying,
yeah, just keep going.
Dark suit. What?
Oh, Willis is my maiden name. That's really cool. So hang on. On a side note, I served my mission in Salt Lake, and we got to go through some live performance temple rituals. And later, I was serving in an area, and my ward mission leader was really familiar to me. I was like, "Why do you look so familiar?" And then I realized that he played the devil in the performance. So I thought that was really funny. So yeah, so in the film before, in the 1990s, there was a preacher character. I think he also had a hat on. If people, I wasn't endowed in 2012, so yeah.
You didn't understand anything because it doesn't
explain anything.
Right. So I love this comment by Amy. She says, I never understood anything even after going through a couple of times. I'm wondering if that's because I always deep down had questions. And I'm going to say, yeah. And the issue is that you have questions, but then also you can't go get answers. And Amy, did you go through Masons in my temple prep class? Because if you did, I don't remember if she was there. We know Amy. She's an amazing human. And so yeah, yeah. Anyway, keep going. Well,
I just want to say on her comment. So they say if you don't understand things or if you have questions, just keep going. Just keep going and keep going. And to me, it never helped. Like all it did was sort of inoculates you. Yeah. And you just memorize things. You learn how it goes. Like I didn't need a temple worker to help me say all the things. But there's no further light. I never received further light and knowledge about what I was doing.
It just became normal. Like, right. Oh yeah, that's just the way it is. It didn't make sense. It just was normal now.
Yeah. So understanding all that came later when I looked into masonry and the Masonic rituals and stuff like that. So,
right. And I just want to say to Amy, so she says, yes, she did go through Masons in my temple prep class. So Amy, I would love after today, if you went and found our temple prep, no prep. And if you need that link, just, shoot me a message on Messenger or whatever, because I would love to know if you remember the pieces that we talked about and how you thought we did. But anyway, all right, keep going.
Yeah, so there's the preacher character, and which I just thought was really interesting. So what they do is they have the devil comes in and he's like, "Oh, you guys can listen to this preacher," and then the Peter, James, and John sort of put him down. So that's like they're just trying to show that Mormonism is correct, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and everything else is not correct. So I just thought that was interesting.
So the preacher is in cahoots with Satan.
With the devil, yeah. So it's just super interesting. It's almost offensive in a way.
Well, it's sort of like so wait, I'm confused. Is this like the preacher is another person
in the film? Yeah.
Okay, and is he supposed to have been sent by God?
This is an extension. Mm-hmm. Remember that Satan says there will be many who will be willing to preach to you the philosophies of man mingled with scripture.
Yeah, and then he brings in
this was just kind of that character to do that thing.
Got it. So this isn't like a temple version of like the story of Job where God and Satan are making bets on your life and fucking things up for you just for fun.
No, this was just that character.
Okay.
I think they even sang a hymn with him in the, I don't know if it was in the film or if it was in the original one. But anyway, I thought even just this one guy I thought was really, really interesting. Also, it reminds me of Brad Wilcox is one of the Mormon leaders, and he made a bad comment where he says that people are playing church that are not Mormons, which again, I think this is just, I think one of the reasons why he was pulled is that it's not very kind. Even though I still think the church sort of has that same rhetoric, like you were saying, is like, there will be others willing to preach to you, but it's not right. It's not good.
Right.
Anyway. I think that now they are trying to kind of blend in with the rest of the Christians, but at this time that they were not, there was definitely a line that they're all wrong. We're right. We're the only true church. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think even as they're trying to, because yes, I agree with you, America, that they're trying to, right now, the Mormon church is trying to blend in with mainstream Christianity quite a bit. And you can see that in some very overt ways and some very subtle ways. So I've got Grace and so Grace and Harmony, I've got right here, their chat on Analyzing Mormonism is off due to protection of children. They're working on it.
Yeah, well,
we're really not.
I don't feel very well protected, just so you know.
Oh, yeah, we didn't really set it up either, so I have no idea.
Right. So as I was saying, they're trying to blend in with mainstream Christianity, but they still assert that they're the truest, most pure form of that. And then Shannon is my sister-in-law. Absolutely love you, Shannon. Shannon and I don't agree on hardly anything when it comes to our religious philosophies, but we are still super close, and I really appreciate that about her. And so, yes, Shannon has never been Mormon for reals, and as somebody that is that identifies as Christian, who's never been a true member of the church, mainstream Christianity is not going to view Mormons as Christian because our theology on the Godhead is so different. All right.
I went to the settings. There's nothing there.
Yeah, so there's I would mostly I would see the Mormons as being Christian. There's just a couple things that I would say aren't, and that's the blood atonement, and then how the church treats other religions is really. So Alex, if you go to the next slide, it will show more. So in the Temple Cast in the 1800s, this is from Analyze's book, and she lists out a whole bunch of other characters that I didn't even know were a thing. So there's not just one more preacher, but there's 5 preachers. There are 5 extra characters. So there's a Quaker preacher, and then she gives them the names. I don't know if the names are significant, but some of them are kind of funny, which is, again, really rude. Like Timothy Broadbrim is the Quaker, Deacon Smith is the Methodist, Parson Peabody is the Presbyterian, Elder Smoothtongue is the Baptist, and Father Boniface is the Catholic preacher. And then also another thing that she also has Jehovah and Jesus as listed as 2 different people, which I thought was really interesting. I'm not sure why that's a thing. I don't know. Maybe it's one was the voice and one was the character of Jesus. I'm not sure why those are separate. So
yeah, well, and that's so weird. It's almost like, because those are like almost like the primary competitors to Mormonism. So it's almost like, don't listen to any of these people because they're all wrong too.
Right, and even earlier, they even mentioned the Strangites, because they even list some of the religions that were breakoffs of the Mormon Church, and the Strangites were, and he even had his own set of plates and stuff like that. So yeah, they're saying like, these are our competitors. Do not listen to them. We are the one true church. Yeah. So,
sorry, give me a second.
So Julia, like, pause from the show. Alex says that your children thing is a setting in YouTube.
Okay, so she pulled that up.
And so if you want to like chat with him in the private chat, he might be able to help you get that unlocked. So that way your audience can interact with us a little bit better. So we are working on it. Analyzing Mormonism. We definitely want to make sure that you are able to join us. All righty. So Mason, what are your thoughts so far while we wait for
okay. I think I changed the setting.
Yeah, so if somebody is,
I think Coco just came up saying that she found us here, so maybe if she can go back and
if one of the listeners,
I think I clicked the right thing, because it was like, do you want this for kids? And I said no, so hopefully that works.
All right, yeah. So if there's somebody watching us from Analyzing Mormonism, if you could try and comment so we can see, that would be amazing. All righty, do you want to keep going or do you want to wait for America?
We can probably just keep going.
Okay.
So yeah, if you go to the next slide.
Just don't want you to pay for that later.
I think it's fine.
So Julia, Coco says it still says disabled.
Oh, man. Okay.
All right, we will continue to work on that. Thank you so much, Coco, for checking.
Okay. Let me see again. Oh, so it's on my end. It says it's not made for kids. I don't know if it's needs time to.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if you'll have to end the stream and then it'll kick in the next one. So for those of you who would like to make a comment, if you head to the Daisy Girl Communications YouTube channel or the Sarah Westbrook Facebook page, you should be able to get in here. And then we've got from Brooklyn, people need to leave the video and then click it again, and the settings should update, is what we've got from Brooklyn. So if you're in Analyzing Mormonism and you want to try and stay there in order to support their platform, please log out, log back in, and see if it will let you comment. That way we can do that. Yay, it works. Hello, America. Thank you, Brooklyn. You're brilliant. I'm going to put this up here. Thank you so much to our... Well, and I just want to say shout out to the audience. Thank you so much for troubleshooting with us.
This is the first time we've done this from a different platform.
Yeah,
so.
StreamYard into YouTube.
Yeah.
Looking at it.
Awesome. So thank you so much. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so if you just
and
want to move to the next slide, Alex, and we'll go on. So right now, I haven't been through the temple in a long time, but a video was released and I was able to watch that. And so that's where that's coming from. So today, the drama and film it's mostly a slideshow presentation. I'm pretty sure it's not a video. I think all of it is a presentation.
That's correct.
Okay. And so a lot of it are pictures
it's
of Jesus.
It's basically the same narrative as when you had the video, but they've just made it a slideshow instead.
Right, which I think is interesting, and we'll talk on that as well. So a lot of the pictures are of Jesus, which is new. Usually he wasn't depicted as much; it was just his character. But there's a lot of paintings of Jesus that have never been seen before. So that's a nice addition to that. So you'll see the slides of the pictures of Adam and Eve and Jehovah, and then from the film that we'll talk about. So now it's just the images. Yeah, and so I just thought that was interesting. I don't know if there's anything more to say on that. They're just trying to make it more focused on Jesus.
Point out that before this, Jesus had a very minor role in the endowment session. Like you could literally take him out and he would
I still feel that way about it,
no issues, because he's literally just a messenger between God and the humans. So
I know, and that's something that's super fascinating to me as well, because we talk about that the Mormon church is so focused on Jesus, but then when you actually go to their church and attend their services and look at their content, it's really not. So James Trek says, Julia, great job on LDS discussions the other day. Hey, James, can you give us what show so our audience can follow and support them, please? Because that's awesome.
So that was on Mormon Stories from the LDS discussions where we talked about John C. Bennett. So, and we're doing more parts of that. So so thank you for that.
So and you've got a question here from Coco. So I wanted to just say, Mason, I think the last time I went to the temple with you was right after they switched it to the slideshow. And I remember just being like, this is really boring. And then I'd never been back. Thank you so much for putting that comment up there, Coco.
If you go to the next slide.
Julia, this question is directly for you.
Yes. So I talk about this here in this slide. So Coco, we'll get right to this. So in 2019, the church unexpectedly made the decision to change the film into a slideshow. Yes. So it is believed that the previous films were directed by a man named Sterling von Wagenen. And then if you look up on Mormon Stories, that shows that more in detail on this specific case. And he was arrested in 2019. He was convicted of child sexual abuse and sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. This could very well be the reason that the film was changed to a slideshow. Is I don't know if copyright things or if they just didn't want to be associated with Sterling. That's what I attribute to that change in 2019. The new slideshow presentation is much shorter. I think, Mason, you said the wording is the same, but I think I don't know if it's because the films, because they show a long time showing the horse or the bear or whatever, but because it's a slideshow presentation, it's shorter now. Like, I think it's like 20 minutes shorter or something like that. Yeah, he's the one. Yeah, thank you for that, Coco. So Sean Escobar was the one on Mormon Stories. So his is a very, very good story. Like if you watch any of them, his is a really good one to watch.
Yeah. So one of the things that we love here at Unpacking Mormonism is we absolutely love to support the other Exmo, Post-Mormon, and other podcasts that are out there. There's so much great content. So if you want to be able to find this, all you have to do is Google Sean Escobar and Mormon Stories, and it will pull it right up for you. Mm-hmm. And we will also do our best to get that link into our show notes for those of you that are listening later so that you can see this. And then James asks, is the temple vid still a slideshow now?
Yes.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is.
A video was released on YouTube just a few months ago. Maybe it might have been October. I can't remember, but I downloaded it really fast because I knew it was going to be deleted, and it was. But it's still a slideshow presentation. It's still these same characters. However, they have inserted a lot of images of Christ. So I think it's still the slideshow. There's just more of Christ, to my knowledge, and that might have changed.
I think the big change for timing is just that they don't have a witness couple anymore, and they don't actually give the tokens out.
Oh, that's true, and that's a good point. Yeah.
So it's not the material in there that is the big time thing. It's like the fact pauses. That it's the pauses and the giving out of the tokens and all of that stuff. Obviously takes time, especially if you have a big session.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they've taken all that out, and you could speculate for a
Wait.
while about as to why that's been done, but that's the case. Yeah.
Mace, are you saying that they took out like the passing of all the tokens as you've
According to the information that I
received them?
have here, and I can't remember who this is
What
from.
I-
I think it was from
What I
RFM.
understand, what I thought I understood is that, and I didn't watch the full video. I should, but I think that they show people on the screen giving that, like, instead of having a witness couple of themselves standing in front at the altar showing the signs, or how to accept them and receive them, or whatever. I think they show that on the presentation.
That would make sense. And
Yeah.
Coco brings up a good point, that it was most likely because of COVID. I know that the last time that I went, they were still passing them out. That was before COVID. And so then James asked, so no more tokens? No, James, the tokens are still there. They're just not delivered throughout the session in
Right.
the same way.
So in the session, it says, we desire all to receive it, all arise, and then everybody is given that token. That's not happening. To my understanding, you still would be using those tokens at the veil, but you're not getting them during the session itself.
That's super interesting. Okay, so yeah, they're all delivered to the Lord at the end, and so I guess that's the main part that you would need them.
You just got to memorize it the way you see it, and you don't get to practice.
Yeah.
Which, you'll
Well,
also
they're really
have
tough,
your,
so,
you'll
yeah.
also have your hover person there to make sure that you do it correctly at the veil. Like, that was always something that was weird to
that's
me,
really,
is
really
why do we have to get stopped so much at every step in order to do it right? So yes. So
it's
now
not
it
supposed to
appears
come
that you only get them at the veil.
That's super interesting. Yeah, it is a huge change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, keep going.
Okay,
Well,
so yeah,
well,
Alex, if you want to go?
No, you forget. That's how it always happened.
But we just
Once we change it, that's
We've
the
always been at
new
war with
gray is the new black.
East Asia. You mean West Asia?
West Asia.
You mean East Asia?
Oh, psh.
And you mean West Asia?
Sorry.
Sorry. That's from 1984.
So let me just read this. Okay. So the church's response to the next. Oh yeah. So this is the church's actual on their website. They responded to the 2019 changes. Whenever the Lord has had a people on the earth who will obey His word, they have been commanded to build temples. Scriptures document patterns of temple worship from the times of Adam and Eve, Moses, Solomon, Nephi, and others. It doesn't, but okay. With the restoration of the gospel in these latter days, temple worship has also been restored to bless the lives of people across the world and on the other side of the veil as well. Over these many centuries, details associated with the temple work have been adjusted periodically. So they're sort of acknowledging that these changes are happening, including language, methods of construction, communication, and record keeping. Prophets have taught that there will be no end to such adjustments as directed by the Lord to His servants, which is super interesting. A dedicated temple is the most holy of all places of worship on the earth. Its ordinances are sacred and are not discussed outside a holy temple. So yes, we're going to change things, and we will always change things. So I thought that was really interesting.
especially since Joseph Smith said it was not changeable. Right. Sorry, go ahead, Mace.
Well, it's just that they talk about details, details associated with the temple have been changed. But I mean, I don't know if you remember, I remember also a covenant to avoid all loud laughter, evil speaking of the Lord's anointing, the taking of the name of God in vain, and all other unholy and impure practices. That's changed, right? That's a covenant, right? That's a covenant. Also, the taking of a covenant too. That's not a detail. That's a covenant.
Yeah.
And we're taught in the church that covenants are forever. They're long lasting.
Right. The doctrine doesn't change.
Right. And if you think about it from, when the whole interview with Holland on BBC about Mitt Romney and him taking the covenants, well, did he promise to, never talk about these things on pain of death? Well, the answer is yes. Like, he's never gone back through the temple for his own endowments again. Accordingly, his promise was exactly what was made back in 1950 or whenever it was. My promise was in 1996. My parents' promise was before 1990. They took those covenants. So you're talking about something that has changed. You cannot take a covenant that has a penalty, take away the penalties, and claim that it's unchanged. That's just not. It's not rational. To use Bill Reel's word, it's not rational. It's just, it doesn't make sense to say that that's a detail, because it's not.
Right. Exactly. Very good that you pointed that out. So if you go to the next
and hang on, before you do that, I want to pull up this comment from Coco, because this was true for me too, Coco. When I went through, I didn't covenant directly with God. I covenanted to my husband, and that through God.
Damn right.
And not all, thank you. Yeah, fuck yeah, I did, Mace. Thank you so much. Only if you're being obedient. No
That's
wonder
true.
your family is so mad at me for corrupting you and taking you out of the church, you poor unfortunate soul, you. But yeah, this is, I mean, there was, I think, only one, and Coco, please remind us if I'm wrong. I think there was only one of the covenants that I promised directly to God.
There is.
And the
It's-
rest
it's
of
only
them
the one.
was,
Yeah.
yeah. And I love this by
Yeah,
James,
that's a
says, every
very good
generation since Joseph Smith has made a different covenant. So, I mean, you know, when God calls us all back by our very limited new names, how is he going to be able to keep up with which person made which covenant?
Well,
Yeah.
and you know what? Ultimately, I don't think that's as important as the fact that you're not talking about it. You're not explaining it. You're like, you know what? This was a different generation. They had different priorities. God didn't, you know, whatever the half-assed explanation would be. They're not even trying to make the explanation. They're not talking about it. Like,
and I
I
would
don't care that
say-
covenants have changed. In reality, what you're promising now seems better to me than what you were promising 50 years ago.
Mhm.
However, if you're going to ignore that happened 50 years ago, like the only way you ever learn about these things, you asked me right at the beginning, Sarah, did I know about these things? No, the only way you learn about these things is by listening to the sources that you're told you're not supposed to listen to.
Yeah,
But they're telling the truth.
Well,
Wow.
and in the beginning, when I talked about my experience in 2004, and it really bothered me, you know, my grandma wrote me this big long letter and was like, you know, you don't need to worry about those things. It's just something, just let it go. It's not a major change. The promises and the ordinances haven't changed, just the punishments have changed. And that's no
Right.
longer true either. Now the promises and the covenants have changed. But also, this is one of those areas where the older generation tends to say that they changed it because us newer generation cannot handle it. And for me, I think it's more that the younger generation is more used to speaking up for things that are not okay. And so when they put that pressure on, hey, it's not okay to say that it's okay for me to die if I tell you what my new name is, or if I, you know, show you a secret handshake from the Mormon/Mason Temple ceremony.
Right.
But we do have that history of, you know, the Masons being murdered for sharing those things. And there's even some theories out there that one of the reasons Joseph Smith was murdered was because he had revealed the Mason signs. I mean, there's lots of theories, there's lots of things that go into that, but that is one of the things, you know, that people were upset with him about, the sexual predatory behaviors and for revealing the Masonic signs, tokens, and symbols. So
Well, and he was also like a crazy, strong political powerhouse and had no one to stop him. And he had an army and was trying to run for president. So there's also
he had
that.
the largest military unit in the United States.
Yeah.
So yeah, that
Right.
was a huge threat.
It's completely off subject, but just real quick, Bill O'Reilly wrote a series of books like called Killing Lincoln or Killing Christ or whatever. I read the one that it was about killing Kennedy. And in that he talks about, you know, we don't know who actually did it, but he shows that there were like actually 5 or 6 different groups of people that had an interest in possibly killing Kennedy. So it's interesting that you bring that up about Joseph Smith. There was not just one group of people. There were several different groups of people that might have had an interest or did have an interest in killing him. Ultimately, he got killed.
Right. But that's not something that you actually hear about as a faithful member.
Right. No.
Any
He
of
was
the
completely
possible
innocent.
reasons. Yeah, they were just enemies of the church, and that's all you need to know.
Yep.
Yeah, James, I feel the same way about not understanding what you're doing. And the cupping shape didn't make any sense to me until way later. I
Yeah, so
theorized.
Julie, do you have a slide for this one and what those shapes mean now?
I talk about them later when we talk about the penalties. I don't show the signs. I don't show the the handshakes or anything like that, but we will talk about that later. So I don't know if we want to talk about it now.
Oh,
or
I
wait.
can
No,
tell you.
so I just no, Mason. Let's wait until it comes up in the slideshow.
Okay.
So James, yeah, we're gonna come back because I think so. James says, this is one topic that makes me so angry because of how many hours I spent in the temple trying to understand the signs and tokens. Never really understood the cupping shape, and really, this is the issue with not talking about the changes. Is that now you're making all these covenants and whatnot, but because the church has removed certain pieces, it no longer makes sense. This is like, trying to teach somebody calculus before they understand algebra. Pieces of it might be like, okay, I can see the connection from here to here, but I can't really solve the problem because the piece that I need to solve it isn't
Right.
there. I think it's the same thing that happens. Oh shoot, I just totally lost my train of thought. So I'm just gonna skip that. When it comes back, I'll say that. And that's the other thing. Yeah, Amy, I love her comment of, because I didn't really understand it, I wouldn't be able to explain it to anybody else. And I think, Amy, the other thing is because you don't understand it, you're afraid if people are asking you questions, well, why do you do that? You're like, well, yeah, I don't really know. And then that's when people that aren't there are gonna give that to you. There's also a comment here. Do you guys have the sealing stuff in your slideshow, Julia?
Oh, about sealing each other to our spouses?
Yeah. Did you cover the sealing at all in this slideshow?
No,
Okay. So
we
then
can talk about that at any point. Yeah.
yeah. So I want to pull up this comment here by Coco, who says, why hasn't, let's see, what hasn't changed is that there has never been a marriage ordinance. And so why can't the LGBTQ get married? The church could say they won't seal them. And I love this comment because my dad's thing, like when we were doing Prop 8 and stuff, I remember my dad saying things like, well, if the LGBT can get married, then that, is an infringement on our religious beliefs. And I was like, no, it's really not, because you can just say, if you want to get married legally by the laws of the land where it's going to end when you die anyway, fine, but we can reserve our right to religious practice, and they just cannot be sealed in the temple, which would fall under your Freedom of Religion Act. And so that was always really interesting to me. And that grew when Mason and when Mason was serving in El Paso, Texas in the military. Those who were getting married in Mexico, there were certain laws that were different. And so you would get married civilly and then go to the temple. And I think that's the case for many European countries as well, that their countries do not recognize the marriage inside the temple is legally binding. So they would get married civilly and then go to the temple. So as long as you were, able to answer all of the temple recommend questions appropriately at the time of your wedding, you did not have to wait the year. Coco wants to point out that, just to be clear, they are completely for that people can get married to whoever they want, no matter what. I would just add to that, yeah, absolutely, with consent. But one of the things that I think we touched on briefly, Mason, in a previous show that people don't understand about the sealing ceremony is Mason and I are adoptive parents. And so our adopted kids would get sealed to us after the adoption was finalized. And what we learned is that the siblings of the adopted child, so like our oldest was sealed to us when he was 6 months old, so then our second one was sealed to us when he was like 8 months old, so on and so forth. And one of the things that was really interesting is that as they were sealed to us, all of our other children could come into the temple and be present to observe and view that sealing ceremony. So like when our youngest got sealed to us, at the time he was our 7th child. So we had Mason and I, our parents, siblings who'd wanted to come, some friends who'd wanted to come, and 6 of his siblings. So my oldest at that time, how old would Eric have been? Like 15, 16 when our youngest Tyler was sealed to us. So all of these little kids could come into the sealing room to watch their other adopted sibling get sealed to us. But when Mason and I got married, our siblings were not allowed inside the sealing room to watch the marriage ceremony or the sealing, even though there's no secrets. But what they say is basically the same.
I hadn't thought about that before because, like, I witnessed my siblings be adopted and sealed to us. But my older siblings, I couldn't go to the temple for them because I wasn't endowed yet. So that is really interesting that's a thing. But talking about with Coco, talking about what were we talking about here?
Coco was talking about people like the LGBT people getting married.
Yeah. So at the earlier at the temple, they would just say you had to be married legally, and then you can get married in the temple. And then they changed the wording to reflect to be more, how do I say that? Against the homosexual marriages, where it says you can only be married under God's law. And so they're trying to add that in there where it's like, oh, it doesn't matter if you're married legally, whereas like she and I can get married legally, but it's not God's law, so you can't get sealed in the temple. So, so they're making it more.
So just, the question there from Coco, for me, I just have to ask the question, well, who benefits? And we talked about this in a previous episode too.
So wait, Mason, read Coco's question for those
Coco's
who are
question
not.
is, so why can't a sibling watch a marriage? You have to do mental gymnastics to make it make sense. And I agree. For me, as I mentioned in a previous episode, I just have to ask the question, well, who benefits by keeping the siblings out? And it's
sorry, continue.
See, I'm not the only one who does it.
It's just, for me, it's just the church. The church is the only one that benefits because they make it exclusive. Like that, your whole life is focused on getting to the temple. And so if then you make it, oh, well, your older brother's getting married, well, we'll let you in so you can watch it. You take some of the specialness out of it. You take the exclusivity out of it. And now the church doesn't control everything about it. It's not as special. It's not as, I'll just keep using the same words over and over again. So anyway, the church is the one that benefits from that because families don't benefit. Families would be better off if they could be a part of it. If they could even enter the temple and go, wow, this is beautiful. This is special. I love being here. It might actually help them want to get there later on, but it takes some of the specialness out.
Well, and if you think about it in a marriage, you're just for my siblings to come and watch Mason and I get married. Really, all they're watching is Mason get sealed to me as an extension of their now sibling group. Like if you look at the doctrine of the sealing, when you get married in the temple and you're sealed, Mason is now the brother to all of my siblings, and I'm now the sister to all of Mason's siblings. And so it doesn't make any sense. And I love that you had to say that there's mental gymnastics. So, and I'll answer this question from my experience, Coco, and then Julia, I'd love for you to speak to this. So for us with the adopted kiddos, they just observed. They sat in the front row of chairs around the altar, and the only one that held the hand for adopted siblings was the new child being sealed. So they did not have to be in the circle. They did not have to have their hands on the altar as far as Julia's experience, because I think it's different if you've got more than one being sealed at the same time. So Julia.
Yeah, with me, I have 5 stepsisters, but 4 of them were adopted in. So we just watched because we were born in the covenant. So we didn't need to do any hand holding at the altar. But it was interesting for me because seeing the robes was really weird.
At a young age.
At a very young age.
You mean nobody told you? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, but everyone else was around the altar. The ones that participating in the ordinance themselves, my sisters were sitting at the altar and they did the hand holding. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the child that's being sealed just has to be in all white.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm the only one who has to be in all white. So then you're like a spectacle in front of everybody while you're getting sealed and whatever. But so one of the things I wanted to point out is how the church tells you that what they're offering to you is an eternal family where you all get to be together forever. What they're really doing is making it so that you have to jump through all these hoops in order to be together forever. Most other Christian churches just teach like, oh yeah, you'll be together in heaven. That's just a given. But with the church, they're actually they're putting a barrier between you and
they're almost founded on the idea that families are not together
forever. And only by jumping through our hoops can you be.
Exactly.
So
right, again, who does that benefit? It benefits the person that controls the ordinances, right? If I have your salvation in my hand, then I own you.
Yeah.
If you believe that I have that control, I own you.
Yeah. Well, and I love Coco's comment here, just observing gives even more reason why siblings should be able to watch a marriage and a sealing. And I agree. Like, why are we excluding families when it comes to a temple wedding? And then, coming back to, and Shannon says, wow, like, oh my goodness. Yeah, Shannon. So when Mason and I got married, none of Mason's siblings and none of my siblings were in there with us because Mason and I are both the oldest, which is why we're both so damn bossy. And so, it doesn't make sense. Why can't my entire family be there? But then when we go back to the LGBTQ weddings and whatnot, it still doesn't make sense. Never, ever, ever, no part of the Mormon doctrine has anything that would allow the LGBTQ population to enjoy a sealing with somebody of the same sex, and whatnot. But it still doesn't make sense why they then have to go out of their way to make it not happen. So, and then I know that Alex is working right now on getting the picture of my family up on the screen, because I think that kind of just drives it home. Like when you see all of us there, and it's going to take him a little bit because you have to like make it a PDF, whatever. And then, so Coco puts up, my parents weren't there. It was ward day for my husband, and surprise, she was dressed like every other woman in the room at her own wedding. Yes, my mom, Coco, spent like hours. So my mom is a professional seamstress, and she spent hours sewing my dress, every detail, gluing on every bead. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then I covered it all up inside the temple.
You didn't even wear it in the temple. You didn't wear it in the temple. She made you a different one to wear in the temple.
No, she did not. I wore mine, and you kept stepping on my train, and the beads kept coming off, and my mom told you that she was going to kill you if you didn't knock it off right in the temple. My mom threatened murder of my husband if he kept stepping on my
It's not the first time murder
train.
has been threatened in the temple.
Okay, well, let's get there.
So
let's go ahead and move forward. And when Alex gets that picture of my family up, I'll go ahead and interrupt you just so that, because I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. Like when you see the picture of the size of my family, and then you're like, holy cow, everybody. And now, here it is. There is my beautiful family. Thank you. And shout out to Lara Althusius Photography in the St. Robert, Missouri area. She did a phenomenal job. So our youngest is the little boy standing between the two girls in the front. His name is Tyler. He is our youngest baby. And when he was sealed to us, all of the older kids except for one, so the young man in the back with the long hair just joined our family about a year ago. But everybody else, when he was sealed in the temple to us, we were sealed in the Dallas, Texas temple. He was 3.5 when he was sealed to us. We took custody of him right before he turned 3. So his adoption was finalized about 6 months later. So he was 3.5 when he got sealed to us. And we actually had to get, and I was instructed by the church never to reveal this. So here comes another secret that is coming out here. The little white boy standing next to me that has the shorter haircut, his name is Landon, and he turned 8 the day that Tyler got sealed to us. So his baptism, the way Mason and I were in the middle of moving, it was this big deal. And because he was already 8, he was not allowed in the temple unless he was baptized. So the rule is for siblings to watch a temple sealing, if they're younger than 8, they're just allowed in. If they're older than 8, they have to be baptized and go through a altered temple recommend interview with the bishop in order to be put on, so that the bishop says, hey, you can come. And we had to get special permission from the First Presidency, from the prophet, because the way that our schedule went, it was a general conference Sunday. And so we could not get Landon baptized in time for Tyler's sealing, because the temple was going to be closed the day that Landon's baptism was. So he was 8, and the prophet had to give Landon special permission to attend his brother's baptism because he was not 8 years old at the time of the sealing. And it literally, y'all, Tyler was sealed to us, and then we drove back to Colleen, and Landon got baptized. So it was literally like, we're talking about 6 hours after, or maybe it was the next day. Mason, do you remember if it was
the next day?
It was the next day.
The
Okay.
problem was that Landon was 8 when he went through the temple, but was not baptized because of the schedule. We were in the middle of the move, and we had family coming in. We just couldn't work the schedule to do it reversed. So we knew that in advance. That's why we got the letter, and they let it go that way.
And the reason that we couldn't get Landon baptized first was because, we couldn't do Landon first was because it was the Saturday. It was General Conference Saturday. That's what it was. It was General Conference Saturday. And so the temple was closed. Hey, Coco. I'm sorry that you lived in Colleen. It's disgusting there. It was our least favorite duty station. So yeah, that's what it was. So what happened is Tyler got sealed to us on a Friday because the temple was closed on Saturday for General Conference. And then Landon got baptized Saturday in between conference sessions. And then after he was baptized, we literally threw him in our car and drove to Missouri and moved. So Fort Hood, 2 babies there. Yes, Coco, I lost my uterus on purpose at Fort Hood. That's the only thing good that came from Fort Hood.
Well,
all right.
And just a quick aside there too, like the church that told us don't tell anybody that this happened. Like if you can make exceptions, isn't that one of the joys of having a true prophet, real leadership? Like, oh, you know what? This is a completely different situation that can't be covered in normal rules. Let's do that. That sounds great. God's okay with that. Why wouldn't you advertise that and say, hey, look, this is the standard, but just know that if there's something weird about your situation, talk to the prophet. He can hook you up. Like it seems like that would be a good thing, but no, it's all about secrecy.
Yep. Well, and the interesting thing is Mason was the bishop at the time. So like the kids and I moved to Missouri. Mason stayed back because of Army stupidity and stuff. So Mason was the bishop and he couldn't do it. And we went to the stake president and the stake president couldn't do it. The temple president couldn't do it. It was, for this issue, we have to jump all the way up to the prophet. And so we had this letter signed by the prophet. And then at the temple, they took the letter away from us and destroyed it. We were not allowed to keep it. I think I have a picture of it somewhere, though, because I'm a sinner. Anyway, all right.
Yeah, you are.
So
You're a
let's
rebel
get
for sure.
back to the slideshow. Go ahead, Julia, in America.
Okay, so yeah, just going back. So the church is saying that the things that will be adjusted periodically, and then he says there will be no end to such adjustments as directed by the Lord and his servants. And then Alex, if you want to go to the next slide. So problems with this response, I should have deleted number 5, but so Adam and Eve were never commanded to build a temple. I don't know anywhere in the Bible where it says that, and I think Bible scholars will agree with that. The Jewish priests never performed any rituals like the LDS endowment ceremony, and marriages were never done in their temple. So again, I don't know why the church is connecting the two. Well, I know why, but I don't know.
It doesn't make biblical sense.
Right. And there's no command in the New Testament for the Christians to build temples. I don't know where that would be. And no evidence exists for baptisms for the dead or marriage ceremonies for the dead in the New Testament, or during its time. So, I don't know. Yeah, so it's just a lot of problems with their statement. So, yeah. Okay, so in 2013, the church. So this happened while I was on my mission. So before, and we'll talk about that. There was one film, and then in 2013, the church released these 3 new films, and that they kind of rotated them through in each temple. And so that was really nice. It was like everyone was really excited about it. It was refreshing. Yeah.
So in the interest of full disclosure, there were 2 videos before.
Oh, there was 2.
Yes.
There were 2.
I heard that there was one with Blonde Eve.
And one had what's his face in it, the Satan guy that the singer was.
The singer.
His name is on Rigoletto. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, his name is escaping me right now. But the other video had a guy in it that played Satan, was one of the dancers.
If you go to the
from
next
the
slide,
movie.
Alex, I think it shows him.
Yeah,
that
so
guy?
that's Ballum, Michael Ballum, that's his name.
Okay, yeah.
But the other video had the guy that played Satan in it. It was actually in the movie Girls Just Want to Have Fun with Sarah Jessica Parker.
Oh, that's funny. So I'd always heard that film existed, but I never saw it, and I feel like I went through a lot of temples, but I never saw that one. But
this one was more popular. The other one played occasionally. I don't know what the difference was, but there were two videos.
Super interesting. Okay, so yeah, the 3 new films were, like we said earlier, were filmed by Sterling von Wagenen, and even though he was a known, I don't know if I can say this online, but he was a known pedophile, and the church let it happen anyway.
Well, and somebody, I think it might have been Coco, was saying that he was apparently sleeping with men and women during the time of making the videos, which is
so the spirit.
I didn't realize he had made all 3. He did all 3 of them.
I think, to my knowledge, I think he did all 3.
Huh.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah. So
so Sean did an audio with SVW. So this is Van Wagenen admitting that while he was producing the films, he was having affairs with men and women, which again, consensually or not,
but business, but also the church would not approve of that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so then have your product.
Yeah.
Yeah. All righty.
Okay, so then we keep going.
Yep, keep going.
Yeah, so we talked about this one. Before that, you said there was 2 films. I was only aware of the one, but that's really interesting. So they had these 2, and I think that they were filmed in the 80s and 90s. I'm not exactly sure when they were filmed, but I think they were pretty dated. So the 2013 was really refreshing.
Yes, and the rumor, and I'm going to say this, it was just the rumor. I think, so the blonde Eve, one of the actors in there also had some sort of law of chastity stuff. And so it was kind of like it would come and go off and on. And so, yeah, we saw the brunette Eve the most. But I saw the blonde Eve.
Okay, I was going to say, I wonder if these were filmed in the 90s, because in the other, or sometime, I know that the people that they say the preacher was played by was a BYU professor, and he also had problems. And so I think he might have been arrested as well for similar charges as Sterling von Wagenen. But
yeah, and I love this comment. Yep. Oh, go ahead, Mason. You do it.
No, Coco says, where was the discernment from the leaders? Very good question. Exactly what came to mind for me. And also just they've made it an issue because the leadership talks about discernment. They cannot have these kind of things going, because otherwise you could be like, you know what? That sucks. But you know what? He made a good product. We're just going to go with that.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't have that because it undermines the discernment. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's a good. That's a great statement, Mason. Like, yeah, there's people. I mean, should we pull that 70s show from production forever? I mean, a lot of money was put in there just because what's his face was found guilty. I mean, I know there's going to be a lot of opinions about that, but the temple video didn't have any quote unquote issues in it. So why do we have to pull it because one of the people on the production team sinned? I mean, if Hollywood worked that way, Hollywood would be broke. I mean, they're already broke, but
yeah.
So
all right.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide. Okay, so this is one thing that I found was really interesting. So during, I should have edited the slide a little bit better, but during the early 1800s, there were only 4 cast members for the live production. There was Elohim, Jehovah, Michael, and then they called him the serpent. That's what Heber C. Kimball says in his journal. And so one thing that is also interesting is that you'll notice that there's no Adam and Eve. So each of the temple patrons, male or female, the males would play Adam and the females or the women would play Eve. And so they would act like Eve and they would partake of the fruit. They usually had, and I'll talk about this too, they would take the fruit and they would accept it, and then they would have this conversation with Satan. And then Peter, James, and John were added later. I think they were added still early on, but it was still later. And then Heber C. Kimball seems to say that they were added for convenience, because I wonder if there was a lot of running around. And so it was just easier to have these 3 messengers come in and play this part. So Peter, James, and John were later, and Adam and Eve were played by the members coming in to
patrons.
get the patrons. Yeah.
that makes so much more sense. And then you have that makes so much more sense with now, what the witness couple was actually for. Got it. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So if you go to the next slide.
Okay, hang on. Since you're going to ceremonial clothing, one of the things, and I don't know if you have this in here later, one of the things that really stood out to me in the endowment session is that when Peter, James, and John come down and give Adam the token, which is the handshake thingy that I'll let you talk about later, they were able to touch them. Right. I like, we've got, here's somebody who's given us a squirrel moment. Alex, my dogs are goth gives us the rainbow thing. I just thought that was really funny. So I've got to see what goth dogs are here. That would be awesome. So squirrel. So anyway, I remember going through when you read like from there's my squirrel, Doctrine and Covenants, the way you tell a true messenger from the Lord or a non-true messenger from the Lord is whether or not you can touch them. And if they have already lived on the earth and are a resurrected being, then you can physically touch them. And Peter, James, and John are coming down to the man Adam and the woman Eve, whatever, to say that he's a true messenger from God, but they have not yet lived on the earth, which means they have not yet had a body, lived, died, and gotten resurrected. And yet in the temple, they can touch each other and feel it. And so I remember sitting in the temple the first time watching that video. And when they do their little, sharing of the tokens so that Adam knows that they are true messengers, I was like, no, they're not. According to Joseph Smith, they're the fake messengers because they extended their hand and you're not supposed to feel it because they've not yet lived on the earth.
Yeah, Joseph
Details.
really painted himself. So because I knew about that part of Joseph Smith's teachings. So whenever I went to the temple, I just thought, oh, because he's touching him, this is all symbolic. This is not, has no reflection in actual history. And you don't read those stories in Genesis. You don't read Peter, James, and John, or that I can recall, or even in the Pearl of Great Price. And so I remember bringing this up to one of the senior missionaries in the visitor center that I worked in. And I was like, oh, it's all just symbolic. Peter, James, and John weren't actually there. And he was like, yes, they were. They were literally in the Garden of Eden. So I thought that's a really funny thing.
Well,
Wait, no, they weren't supposed to be in the Garden of Eden. Weren't they after Adam and Eve got cast out?
Yeah, they
when
were.
they were cast out. You're right.
But
Yeah.
but none of it can be because they're like, oh, money. And you're like, why is there money if you're the first ever? And they're like talking about, oh, there's other humans that they're supposed to be the first humans. No, all of this has to be symbolic. It doesn't make any sense if you're trying to say it is real.
Right. It's also out of order from all. So the endowment video is completely out of order from what's portrayed in the Bible and in Moses in the Pearl of Great Price, which is coming from Joseph Smith. So what the hell happened there too? So all right. Now
another random thing is that Joseph Smith also taught that if an angel comes to you and they're blonde, they're also of the devil. So yeah.
Oh my, what?
He said if they have sandy colored hair, then they're not of God. So
okay, well, Julia, it's good to know that you're a very devilish woman. Lucky you, America. Just saying.
Wow, the anti-Aryan.
Okay, so I think I just have one slide for this one. So Alex, if you want to go over, I just wanted to show what this kind of was. So during the endowment ceremony, temple patrons are required to wear these separate articles of clothing. So there's the robe, and somebody mentioned earlier that it used to be you used to switch it from the left. Oh, hang on, I'm getting it backwards. You used to switch it from the left shoulder to the right, and now you just leave it onto the right, which I thought was a really nice change because I always got stressed about what order things go in.
And then taking all the layers off and putting them all back on.
And now they don't.
Right, in like a minute and a half, and then your sash falls to the floor, and then it's touched the floor, and it's not supposed to touch the floor.
I don't know what's the matter with you guys. I never had any
nowhere
of those
to
problems.
put anything. So like, where are you supposed to put your apron while you're taking off the? Yeah. You're just holding them awkwardly with your hands while you're like.
Yep, and whoever posted this obviously hadn't been in a while because their bow is on the wrong side, which Coco points out. So the bow is supposed to be on the opposite hip of the shoulder that the robe is hanging off of. Yeah.
Well, they're not going to heaven anyway because they posted this on the internet. So
I know. Do you remember those missionaries that got excommunicated for showing off their garments? Yep, they're not going to heaven either. Poor guys.
Okay, so there was the robe, the baker's hat or the veil for women, and there was this green apron, and there was this sash and the slippers. And the green apron it's a very Masonic. The Masons had an apron as well, and and with Masonry they got to put, I think, their own renditions of whatever was on the apron, like whatever was symbolic to them. And Joseph took that and he made it so there was nine leaves,
specifically 9 leaves, and there's was it green? So in the beginning, they used to sew their own. Like the women would sew their own. They'd get really intricate and they'd be really beautiful. And then they had to put a stop to that because then it was getting too fancy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. This picture is just when I pull up the web. So he might have just been trying to make a tie, make it seem like he was wearing a tie, but I don't know what's around.
Yeah, so this dude, all the ceremonial clothing is there, but he doesn't have it on right. So since he doesn't have it on right, his ordinances don't count.
Or maybe it's symbolic about how he's being choked by
maybe. Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so I just wanted to put this up here just so that we can talk about it because it's super interesting to me. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, and you can go to the next one. So yeah, I just want to talk about really briefly what this is in case people don't know. So the film encompasses like 3 different parts. It talks about the creation, where Elohim instructs Jehovah and Michael to go through the 6 creative periods. And I don't know that they're, like you mentioned, I think they're kind of out of order from the Bible about which
just one piece.
Oh, just one.
The temple order actually makes more sense. Like if you look at the Bible, it says that God planted the earth with everything, and then he put the sun and the moon in the sky. Whereas in the temple, the sun and the moon come first on day 3, and then he plants all the vegetation on day 4. It makes more sense, but it is interesting, like Sarah said, that you can have Joseph Smith giving you new revelation that is supposedly fixing the Bible and the book of Moses. But then when the temple ceremony comes around, whatever, we'll just make our own order.
Wait, one thing that I think this is still part of the temple. I think that the day 1 is they separate the waters from the land. And then I think day 2 is when there's light. So I always thought it was funny that they separate those in the dark. I don't know. I just thought that was funny.
Well, no, day 1 is that they create the earth. Day 2 is that they separate the firmament from so they basically they create the atmosphere basically on day 2. Day 3, they put the sun and the moon in the sky.
Okay. So they do. Yeah. I just thought that was funny.
Whereas in Genesis, actually, it says in the beginning, there was nothing and God said, let there be light, and there was light. So it's a little bit different situation.
And scholars like Jen McClellan point out that in Genesis it's 2 creation stories that are pressed next to each other. So another part of it,
one's a spiritual and one's an actual creation. But yeah.
Yeah. So another part of it is the birth of Adam and Eve. So Lucifer appears in the garden and tempts them to partake of the fruit. They do, and they are cast out. And then Adam and Eve are with Lucifer in the lone and dreary world. And then that's when Peter, James, and John appear. And they give them further instructions, including these signs and tokens. And then in the past, they gave them also the penalties. So I just wanted to run through what that was really fast. So yeah, we can go to the next one. Yeah, so this is one of my favorite things. I don't know why this is my favorite, but they used to bring in pots of like planted pots and in boxes and things like that to make it sort of feel like you're in a temple or in a garden. And so what they do is they take an evergreen tree and they would tie fruit to it, like oranges, apples, grapes, and raisins and things like that. Just one, they would just pick one. When Analyza went through, she says that they pulled raisins off of it and then ate them. So they had to have a lot in there because some of the sessions were as large as 200 people. So that'd be a lot of work to get that all set up. But I just think that's funny is that
because they were acting as Adam and Eve. So they're wandering around the room, literally picking off fruits and literally being scared by the devil and hiding from God, literally behind chairs.
Yeah, we have pictures of these too. So, yeah,
wait. Are the pictures in here? Because
yeah.
I
so
gotta
you go to the next slide, Alex. Yeah, so this is one thing that I thought was really interesting. The character of Lucifer, who came out to tempt Eve, he sounds to me like he was always a white man dressed in black clothes. And in her story, she says he had a black mask on. And so right here, this is the artist's rendition. I don't think this is Analyza's. I don't know if this is what actually happened. She describes him as dressing like the man of Mephistopheles, who is like, if you just Google him, you'll see his great costume. But I just thought that was interesting is that they kind of make Satan a black person, which is again also really mean. And I'm glad that they have changed that. So, and we've showed pictures of their Satan.
I've actually seen Mormonism do that many times, that they've made Lucifer a black man and everybody else is white. It's disgusting.
Well, and you'll see that with the Book of Abraham. Joseph says that this is a servant, whereas it's actually the god. I can't remember his name. One of the gods in the Egyptian. I can't remember his name. Yeah. But it's just funny that he makes him a servant.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause you real quick. I just got a text message. That's why I'm looking in my lap. My 3:00 appointment just canceled. So we can go ahead and make sure that we finish your thing because I no longer have to be gone at 3. Alex, please let me know what your timeline is, if you need to end early and whatnot. And if I need to take over, send me that in the private chat and go.
Okay, so that's pretty much all on this slide. And you can just read more. This is just from Analyze's book. So you can go to the next one. So do you want to read this? I don't know if it's...
Sure, yeah. So Analyza gives a fun recitation of her experience in the temple. She says, after the aprons were on, or after Adam and Eve partook of the fruit and discovered their nakedness, the voice of Elohim was heard calling Adam, but he was afraid and hid himself with Eve. So all the rest of us were supposed to follow their example, and there was a most undignified scurrying behind sofas, chairs, and any other article of furniture that was convenient. It was like nothing so much as the old game of hide and seek, and it was a rare piece of fun to see men and women scudding in every direction about the room. Was it scudding or scuttling? Okay. It was like a good old-fashioned frolic to me, and I actually laughed aloud, much to my discomfiture and Heber Kimball's horror, who reproved me afterwards and told me I was very wrong. For he said, these things are sacred and make me feel as solemn as the grave, and I can scarce refrain from shedding tears every time I see them. So she got in trouble for laughing at the silliness of playing hide and seek with God.
Right. This is hilarious to me in the sense of, okay, so, again, look at how many kids I have, right? Now imagine them playing hide and go seek in silence. It's not going to happen, y'all.
No, yeah, there would be, completely silent.
Yeah, I'm talking about that. But yeah, if you go to the next slide, she actually...
I think Shakespeare would be impressed. I get like Much Ado About Nothing kind of a thing, or the Midsummer Night's Dream. We're just, frolicking in the woods.
Yeah, so this is the one of the artist renditions in her book of Wife Number 19 is they're all running around and they're hiding behind chairs and things. So I totally get why she laughed out loud and why Heber Kimball, I don't know why he would cry over this, but so I guess he was feeling this.
Because she's a woman.
Oh, but Heber Kimball was the one who cried. He says, I'm the one that feels you need to not laugh because this is really sacred.
Well, she just covenanted to not laugh loudly. So
maybe that's where the no loud laughter comes from. That actually would make sense. Like we promise to not have loud laughter to make sure that when you're, running around the temple playing hide and go seek. I mean, y'all, I'm sorry. I've got another fire whiskey joke or cinnamon whiskey joke. I keep saying fire whiskey because of Fireball. But I mean, it used to be so much more fun. I would not have been bored.
Right.
During
this
that
sounds like an adventure.
Yeah, this sounds like, I don't know, Mason. This sounds like some fun date night foreplay stuff that later we go home and finish up. I'm serious. Like this is
with a group of other
people.
people.
We got to bathe together.
Alex, if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, like communal bathing, cinnamon whiskey, hide and go seek. What happened? Why we need to go back to the Joseph Smith's temple stuff. That sounds way more fun.
And as far as I'm not sure.
I think this was actually Brigham Young. And we have this theory. There's somebody goes into it deeper than we do. I can't remember who it was.
Sorry,
but,
this is funny.
The theory is that Brigham Young got to play in the Pizarro play, and he was like some big character. And after that, he was in love with plays. He actually built a theater in Salt Lake City, even though at the time theater was like really taboo. Because it's only like the whorish people are on stage, right? But he loved it. And so he loved plays. And so then he put himself in this play and got to be God every time they did a temple endowment. And
we do know that Joseph, sorry, there's a car. We do know that Joseph, after taking Brigham through the endowment ceremony and the washing and anointing, he was like, Brigham, this is like a rough version of this. So I need you to take it and kind of make it better. And so that's why I think maybe it wasn't Joseph who did the Adam and Eve story, but it was Brigham because it just sort of fits. It just makes
more sense because Brigham Young was this kind of interesting character. I don't know if you guys know anything about Brigham Young. Analyzing Young talks a lot about him and gives you kind of a different view of his character. And he was very haughty and very liked attention and strutting around in his nice outfits, but also demeaning other people and making sure that nobody else felt good about themselves. So anyway, so
are you trying to say that he was a narcissist? Are you trying to say that?
Yes.
So if you look at my name, I have that LPC. I'm not allowed to diagnose people that are not inside my clinic, but I can say that based on what I know about him, I highly suspect that he was narcissistic. Actually, both of them, and also current prophet. I would say that. So thank you so much, Thad, for saying that we are fascinating. I agree with you. This is super fascinating. And also, I absolutely love recording with you ladies because we have so much fun.
Yeah, this is fun.
So much. We struggle with the loud laughter for sure.
Well, after this, dinner at our place if you want to come over, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Okay, so this is just another image, and then you see Satan. He's walking with, I don't know if this is supposed to be Analyza, because not Analyza. I keep saying that.
Elijah R. Snow, because she played Eve at points.
Yeah. So I think they had a main Adam and Eve, and then everyone scurried about with them. But anyway, so this is just another picture, and if you go to the next slide, Alex. Oh, there was another. Maybe. Oh, this is where it's coming from. Okay. Do you want to read this one?
Yeah. So the devil was then cursed, and he fell upon his hands and knees and wriggled and hissed in as snake-like manner as possible. We were all brought out from our several hiding places. The curse was pronounced upon us, which doomed us to leave the beautiful garden and earn our bread by the sweat of our brows. We were then driven into another room, which was called the world, and then we had taken our first degree.
Mason, when they say that Satan was cursed, I just see, and I love my children so much, but I see Tyler and Abby, my youngest, who not getting their way and throwing themselves to the ground and wriggling around in a snake-like manner as they cry. And I can honestly say that definitely feels like a curse sometimes as a mama. So that's hilarious.
That is really, it's really funny. And then I think if you go to the next slide, I think there is a picture. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I think this would be really hard to hold face watching this man wriggle around and hiss like a snake, but yeah.
Yeah. And Coco says that history of theater still goes on today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a couple of the temples. Yeah.
Well,
and at the Shakespeare festivals.
Well, I was going to say, even with the pageants, like the Nauvoo pageants, the Hill Cumorah pageants, the plays and things like that seem to be still a big part of Mormonism. I don't know if they still do that now because of COVID, and I think a lot of those productions have stopped, but still, for a long time they were. So.
Right. Well, and when I was in I think I watched the live one either in Salt Lake or St. George. I know, Mason, you and I did, but together. I think I also went to the St. George. Yeah, we had done that. And there was no wriggling on the floor of Satan when we went. Although I do agree with you, Coco, that my theory does make sense. How can you not laugh? So Coco says, I'm thinking there's something to the loud laughter theory being introduced at this point, because how do you not laugh? I mean, I don't care how old you are, watching full-grown adults fall to the floor and wriggle around as a special religious ritual and rite of passage is freaking hilarious.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. All righty.
Coco's, just really quick as a side note, Coco was mentioning Tuacahn, and I love Tuacahn. I actually had an aunt who was a costume designer for Tuacahn before she passed away. So,
yeah. And thank you for that, Thad. That's really nice.
Yeah, thank you, Thad, for that donation. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. And so, Alex, if you want to go to the next slide. So yeah, I just think this is super interesting. I don't know if we need to read all this. But I'll just go ahead. We kind of already talked about this. We are waited upon by representatives of the different sects, each descanting upon his particular plan of salvation and its advantage over all the rest. The Quaker advocated his non-resistance doctrine. The Methodist gave a graphic, but not very refined description of the future torments of those who did not take his road to heaven. The Presbyterian gave his belief in foreordination and election in very terse lines. And his lines were, if you can't,
you can. If you can't, if you will, you won't. You'll be damned if you do. You'll be damned if you don't.
And the Baptist, let me just keep going.
The Baptists expatiated upon the virtues of immersion and close communion and insisted upon predestination as the principal basis of religion. And the Catholic called for observances of fasts and prayers to the Virgin Mary.
So yeah, they're just saying these are all the different ways the world is presenting it, and these are all incorrect. So
yeah,
again, like
Yeah.
we're the right ones, these are the wrong ones. And then specifically pointing out their plans of salvation is super interesting to me. Like, yeah, because their way or the highway sort of thing.
Well,
But
that and that is definitely not narcissistic at all. Just teasing. Keep going.
and
Well,
Alex, you can skip.
It's classic.
Cult like.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to say cult-like, but sure, it's classic manipulation to show the alternatives, right? Well, if you can make their alternatives look ridiculous, then yours shines a little brighter, even if yours also has some ridiculousness to it. So it's classic manipulation for you to contrast the two in a not so honest light.
Yeah, and it's giving an us and them, like, let's separate
Sure.
ourselves and prove that we're the
Sure.
better one. So
Yeah.
anyway, do you want to read this one?
Oh, you can read it. So I think this one comes from Analyze's book as well.
So she says, we were then given certain signs, passwords, and grips arranged in a circle and told to kneel. The women were also required to cover their faces with their veils.
I'll pause right here.
It's
So
a prayer
women,
circle, right?
yes. So in the beginning, women were not allowed in the prayer circle. It was just for the men. So I just wanted to point that out. So
Then we were bidden to raise our right hands heavenward and take the oath of implicit obedience and inviolable secrecy. The women promised entire subjection to their husband's will. The men that they would take no woman as a wife without the express permission of the priesthood. We all promised that we would never question the commands of our authorities in the church, but would grant them instant obedience. This doesn't sound cult-like at all.
Nope,
We
no
swore-
culty. This is not a cult. Mormonism is not a cult.
Definitely not. It's not.
Nope, not even a little bit.
Not even no. We swore also to entertain an everlasting enmity to the United States government. Love that. And to disregard its laws so far as possible. This doesn't sound which 12th or
Mason, this-
that you're
Right.
supposed to obey the kings and
11. We believe
this
subject to
sounds like
kings,
the
presidents.
opposite. Anyway, we swore that we would use every exertion to avenge the death of our prophet Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram upon the Gentile race, by whose means they were brought to their unhappy fate, and to teach our children to foster this spirit of revenge also. And last of all, we swore never to reveal the mysteries of the endowment house.
Wow, that's Christ-like.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a
Mhm.
lot of, yeah. I don't
Wow.
know how much to go into that, but
And if you guys know anything about the Reformation, about Brigham Young's time in Salt Lake, about what happened with the Mountain Meadow Massacre, all of this makes sense because what their focus was at that time was to, like, they were taught that only the Mormons were going to even live out the century. Like, oh, all the rest of the Americas is just going to be Mormons left. Nobody else will be even alive. So teaching that literally, like, take revenge upon any of these non-Mormons because they are the reason that Joseph Smith and Hiram are dead, and the United States is just the enemy, and they all need to just be gone, wiped off from the face of the earth. All of this ideation is what led to massacres of people coming across the United States, of the Native Americans that got into their hands, all of this kind of thing.
Yeah. Wow.
We talked about this a little bit in one of our episodes about conspiracy theories and how that has happened. We also talked about, like, the the book about the brothers that killed the wife. Oh my gosh.
Lafferty brothers.
Yes, you know, and how that kind of thought process is engendered in the church. Like, not that the church as an entity supports what the Lafferty brothers do, but so much about what the church teaches and the culture of the church breeds that kind of exceptionalism and eccentricism and things like that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. I would say that, in mainstream Mormonism, or the Brighamites version of Mormonism, or, the Salt Lake City, Utah Mormons, you're not going to see this distrust of the government and whatnot quite as overtly as you will in the fringe groups. But when you start looking at the Mormon fringe groups, you're going to start seeing a lot of like the Valo Daybell case. And I mean, they killed their kids because they were quote unquote evil. And by evil, I believe it was JJ had autism. And just you see this. The Lafferty brothers is one. This gets really fringy, and Mason, I don't want to pick on your family at all, but it is very fascinating to me. In Mason's, both his immediate family and his extended family, how many conspiracy theorists there are, and it does not matter what evidence you give them to the contrary. The cognitive bias is so strong. And they feel that the church's teachings support them in that. So, there's a whole lot that goes into conspiracy theories for sure. But one of the things that I find very interesting in the Mormon conspiracy theorists, or those with that Mormon background, is that those conspiracy theories are thought to be supported by the belief system that they align themselves within that Mormonism thing. And then, just the other thing that's just terrifying is Mormons will follow the prophet before anybody else. And so if the prophet said, take up arms, it would happen for many members.
Even
and
something.
So,
oh, sorry. I just wanted to add, even something just as simple as accepting your family who's gay. That they're going to listen to the church. They're going to put the church. A lot of times, they're going to put the church before their own family. So
before their own children.
Yeah. So not just taking up arms, but like even the small things that, like,
although COVID vaccine, that was crossing the line.
The COVID vaccine definitely crossed a line for all the Mormon anti-vaxxers. Thank you, Nelson.
Those conspiracy theories conflicted, and I guess they.
Yeah. Well, and in support of the conspiracy theorists on that anti-vax movement, if you look at where the LDS Church owns stock, Big Pharma is like their third major holding. And so, there's some like question marks over that. So, the biggest issue with conspiracy theories is that most of them do come from some element of truth. Like you can pull, I know that like one of Mason's brothers is huge into like fluoride and chemicals in the water. And in some areas, water is definitely over chemicaled and it's bad for you. And I get that, but it's not taken into the context. So, me personally, I have multiple sclerosis. I chose to get the COVID vaccine because I am immunosuppressed and I take immunosuppressants. I did not have a negative reaction to the COVID vaccine. I felt like that was the right choice for myself. Absolutely. And, there are going to be other people that disagree with that choice, and that's fine. You can, do with your body as you please. I don't want to get there, but it is very interesting to me that a command from the prophet also financially benefited the church. When you look at their portfolio holdings, they have a lot of money in Big Pharma. So
that's really interesting. And Sarah, I'm diabetic, so we also went for the vaccines and have no issues with that. But yeah, my family also is anti-vaxxers, so we got a lot of pushback from that. And they have a lot of my Mormon family also has a lot of other interesting beliefs that I would call conspiracies. To them, they make 100% sense and super interesting. There are some members of my family that will do even energy healing at the same time as believing in Mormonism. And I don't understand how the two of them connect and how they can overlap and not. But you know what? We make.
But one of the interesting things about energy healing is that recently got nixed in the handbook. So it's fascinating. So, all right, keep going.
For me,
I mean, we could do like 20 different podcasts on some of the tangents we've been on today. Go ahead, Mason. Sorry.
Well, and again, just excuse me, taking this to kind of the psychology and the mental health. Let me just pull out a couple of words that are so very toxic here, right? Implicit obedience, inviolable secrecy, promised entire subjection to their husbands, never question the commands of the authorities of the church.
Yeah.
Everlasting enmity to the United States government. These are the kinds of things. And to teach our children to foster the spirit of revenge also. Like, these are the kinds of things that develop that kind of problem. Like, this is a black and white. There's no question, one iota, where the church members stand on these issues after taking this covenant. Like, you have been owned. You know exactly what is expected of you. For a woman, you will obey your husband no matter what. You will obey the leadership of the church no matter what. You will hate the government. You will seek to avenge the leaders of the church that were killed. And of course, that's easy to then move to, oh, wait, there's this group of people down there. They were involved. They were involved in what happened in Missouri and in Illinois. This is our chance. Let's go take them out. Right? Let's go. Let's do this avenging process. Because also you'll have to recognize the drama play of the 1800s. This wasn't in the temple. Like, there was no active temple at this time. This was all part of the endowment house. This is just, it's the extremism that is built into the underlying theocracy of this organization. It's been softened down over the years, but it's still there.
Yeah, the undertones are still there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wish we could like comments and not just highlight them, because I just want to like
Which one?
these comments about the women had the priesthood and healed others. And if energy healing is allowed, then women can do it, and then women don't need the priesthood in order to do it.
Right.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to actually put that suggestion into StreamYard, because when I try and do that, it only gives me the options to put the user in timeout or ban them forever and delete their comments. So maybe we can
don't hit the wrong button.
Right. Maybe we can say, hey, could you give us the ability to like the comment while we're streaming rather than ban them forever? That would be amazing. So I will put that in the suggestion comments, because at the end of every StreamYard thing, we get to give them little suggestions. So I will put the pressure on StreamYard, and they will most likely respond much faster than the Mormon Church in making those changes and getting up with the times. And Coco just gave us permission. We can ban them if we want to, but no, if I actually
comments though.
Yeah, Coco, you've
frankly, she just took all the fun out of it. She took all the fun out of it now. I don't want to ban her now. There's no fun in that.
If I did that, it would be a total accident. I am down with, as long as our audience is not bullying or making racial threats or violence. We're gonna see what you say, even if it's y'all suck and I fucking hate you. I'll be like, oh, let's put that one up and embrace it. I love that stuff. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so the next one. So the next slide, if you want to just go to that one. So this one, I don't know if we need to read the whole thing, but so it's just putting a name on it. So the oath of vengeance was kind of what we read about, teaching your children to take vengeance on the government and stuff like that. So that happened in 1845. So after Joseph Smith's death in 1844, they kind of took a year off of temple work. I think probably the succession crisis was the main thing, but yeah. So this happened in there, and this is the wording of that, and then they just sort of took it away gradually. And if you look at the timeline of when they took it away, it seems like it is 4 generations later. If you think of the generations as in like 15, 20 years, that kind of math. But anyway.
Well, let's read the oath. So this was after, this was 1845?
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely want to read it for our podcast listeners later. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So the oath was, you and each of you do covenant and promise that you will pray and never cease to pray to Almighty God to avenge the blood of the prophets upon this nation, and that you will teach the same to your children and to your children's children unto the 3rd and 4th generation. Yeah, so that was in the temple for many years. So that's
right. Well, and I think our parents did a good job, because, I grew up thinking that Joseph Smith was a martyr, that he had been killed innocently. I had no idea that, he was being killed because of the, destruction of the printing press or that he was imprisoned for the destruction of the printing press and refusal
Never
to
even heard
fix it, right? And that he, that the mob was actually coming after him because of, fear of him perpetrating or continuing his perpetration and soliciting of girls, women, minors, other men's wives without the men's knowledge or the women's consent, or that, it was because of him revealing Masonic symbols and oaths and covenants and those types of things. And yes, Coco, I agree with you. Brigham was an incredibly violent human. He was for me, it's amazing to me that the group that followed him is the group that thrived because of his violence and really unethical practices, for sure. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, stop it.
Sorry, our dogs are playing. If you want to go to the next slide.
Ooh.
Oh, wait, do we go? Yeah. So I just want to talk about this one really fast. So was this part of the ceremony for you guys?
It was not,
but we did
not.
talk about this one in the one that we went
Okay,
through.
yeah,
the
so-
Masonic
yeah, but
stuff,
keep going.
Okay, so the 5 points of fellowship was an important embrace between the temple patron and the Lord. So the 5 points of fellowship, so it was one of the accounts says it was the inside of the right foot by the side of the right foot, knee to knee, breast to breast, and to the back and mouth to ear. So it's just like what they're doing here is the embrace.
Hand to back.
Oh, hand to back. Sorry. Yeah, I need to fix these slides. So then it was removed in the temple ceremony after 1990.
Oh, Coco did it.
Oh,
Coco
wow.
did this. Coco did, and I believe my parents would have, and my grandparents would have, and
My parents
I
did.
actually, my mom once told me
Mitt
that
Romney
there was
did.
only one part of the temple that really bothered her. Like I remember when I was going through, she said there was one part that really bothered me. It was when I had to basically hug God, and I'm really glad that they took that out, and you don't have to do that, Sarah. And I never knew what the hell she was talking about until. Ta-da.
Yeah, so it's just interesting. After 144 years, it was removed without any explanation. And first of all, I think people were complaining because it was very uncomfortable. And then another thing is that this is an exact thing from Masonry. It's the 5 points of fellowship. It's just word for word embrace. The whole thing is exactly from there. I don't even think there's any modification. I think it's exactly the same. Yeah, straight out of Masonry. So
Yeah, Howie says absolutely straight out of Masonry. So
yeah.
wow.
So that's just super interesting. And this is one thing that I've been reading. I don't know how to say his name, but it's David John Berger. He's done a lot of research on the Mormon Temple history changes. And he talks about how the very most important sign and token, or the words that you give to the Lord, the very most important one was always done with the 5 points of fellowship. Like that was a very key part of this. And so to just have it be removed was kind of startling for people because like you said, if this is if this came from the Lord, why was it being changed?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I love Kat's comment here. I did this as well. Was really uncomfortable, especially when the men tried to pull me closer and their arm was resting on my breast. And
Well, they would have pulled you closer because you're supposed to be breast to breast, which is very uncomfortable for women to do this with a man.
Like I guess if your husband's pulling you through, and I don't know if that's the same exact thing.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, there's no. Yeah, that's not.
Hey Mason, let's do this when we get home. I got some ideas. We're gonna Mason and I are gonna go home tonight, and we are going to reenact. We're gonna reenact the slithering devil, the hide and go seek, the naked initiatory stuff. I mean, y'all.
How many bottles of cinnamon whiskey?
Yes, there's going to be cinnamon whiskey involved, but it's going to be the internal cleansing. And just for me, because Mason would die. Mason is not a spicy person or a whiskey person. Yes, I'm going to do some 5 points role play.
I just want you to know, I apologize, Julie and America. The invitation has been rescinded. There will be no dinner at our house for you guys.
Not tonight, anyway. Not tonight. We're gonna be busy. We have learned some things that we missed out on in Mormonism that we would like to experience as part of our healing and connective journey.
Well, I will say, and I don't know if this might be a little bit sacrilegious, but Julia and I do sometimes do the handshakes to each other just because we find it to be funny.
We don't want to
Maybe-
forget them. You could be wrong. So
we
you
could
want
be
to make
wrong,
sure you-
and we need to know the handshakes to get into heaven.
Yeah.
So we just want to keep it fresh.
Can you actually forget that? I mean, like right now I'm learning how to train horses, and my horse trainer has told me that basically you train the horse, and then once they've done it over and over again for 6 years, they'll never forget their training. They just need like little reminders here and there. And I think that's how the temple is. Like, I am never going to forget some of that stuff until Alzheimer's settle
Well, I
in.
think it depends on how many times you've gone through the temple. Like,
Yeah,
if you've
so-
only gone through it once, and then it might be a little bit.
You're also not a horse, so you know.
Yeah. True.
Speak for
Sometimes I
yourself.
would rather be. I mean, for good writing anyway. But Mason, so Coco, I was going to ask you, what do you mean by? But the Mason's meaning is actually eye opening. I would love to see.
With the meaning, yeah, I don't know that. I don't.
Yeah,
I'm not
what
a
are
scholar
you what are
in
you
Mason.
saying there for
We
sure?
actually talked about that in our episode as well. If you listen, we talked about the meaning
Ew.
of that, the 5
So
points of
Kat
fellowship.
says, oh yeah. So Kat's saying that she tried to pull away from the temple worker, and they would pull her closer, and that's really icky.
And the knee to knee got really interesting depending on the height of each participant. Just
Oh,
saying.
gosh.
Yeah, that would be very.
I can't
interesting.
imagine why they took this out. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh,
Howdy.
that'd be righteous. Hi.
I'm going to tell you right now that if somebody was trying to pull me closer, that knee definitely would have risen to the occasion in order to allow me to separate and put some more
Oh,
appropriate
gotcha.
space. Just saying.
Like, I need space here.
Well, and this here too, Kat. Yeah, I was told to stop thinking negatively about it and to think about it as a beautiful experience, which means that you were ignoring your amygdala, which is your fight or flight response, which is the part of your brain that's like, hey, there's danger here. And just giving in, which is why we did one of our episodes previously was kind of like, are we grooming people in the temple? And I would say, in this case, yes, it makes me uncomfortable. I didn't really consent. I'm giving you all of the social cues of, I don't like this right now. Let me back up a little bit. Let me reevaluate. And it's like, no, if you back up, if you slow down, if you reevaluate, that's just Satan. You have to do this. And that is definitely a grooming like behavior. So
One thing, when you were
Go ahead.
talking, one thing that I will say as a positive for the church is that in this new 2023 changes, they used to have you, they say, if you don't want to make any of these covenants, raise your hand now. But they haven't told you any of the covenants that you're about to make. But now in 2023, they'll at least say you'll be making the covenant of chastity, and they'll kind of list the 4 or 5 that you do. And so you still don't know a lot of details about them. And I still think it's not totally informed consent, but at least it's something where that you can then raise your hand and say, I'm not comfortable with these, and then you can leave. But like, it's one tiny thing.
right. Absolutely.
I think. Hold on. I think that the funny thing about that is actually even more dangerous, because then they're giving you the semblance of consent. You feel like you've consented, like you have an idea of what's going on. Oh, we're going to covenant to the law of chastity. Duh, I had to do that already. We're going to covenant to the law of obedience. Well, yeah, sure. Why not? Like,
Right.
it's no new
It all
information.
Yeah.
Right. There's no new information. They don't say anything about you're going to have to covenant to receive and keep tokens secret. They don't
That's
talk
true.
about the fact that you are going to, whatever else it is. Like, there's no real consent, and the church tends to do that, where they make it seem like that quote that you read about why the changes are happening, right? They make it sound like they're giving you full disclosure.
Yeah.
But the reality is they're not. And so it's
Yeah.
even more dangerous, because before there was no consent, aside from just saying, I want to go to the temple, you know, there was no consent for what was actually going to happen. Now there is consent, but you are still ignorant of what you're consenting
That's
to.
Very good
Right.
point. Yeah. very good
Better, not perfect. So we asked Coco, what did she mean about understanding the masonry meaning, that it's very eye-opening. And Coco says that it was done in a brotherly way to help each other. So yes, remember, in masonry, women were not allowed in those ceremonies. It was just about men trying to help men be better. Coco says that the 5 points of fellowship are, remember to put your best foot forward, and pray that we do things in the right way. And that's why, okay. And then they say that is why, if you know why the Masons did the 5 points, but you don't know why the Mormons are doing it, it just becomes very weird.
Yeah.
I think once you know, especially in a temple where you're not supposed to talk about things, you're not supposed to bring up where you're uncomfortable, that's where you end up with the grooming behavior, because you're not allowed to consent. You're not allowed to question. You're not really allowed to pull away. Like, your only option is, okay, it happened to me once, then I don't go back, which then you're shamed for. You know, it's kind of like, if you have questions, you're bad, you're evil. And then I really appreciate Kat sharing that, you know, they hated the temple veil, as so they say, as I felt very uncomfortable, but when I questioned it, I was told that I wasn't righteous enough, and as I attended more, I would grow to love it and see it as so spiritual. And that is exactly what sexual perpetrators do. They're like, yeah, this hurts now, but eventually you're gonna love it. So yeah, in the temple, I'm just gonna say, it's a huge trauma bond, because you're supposed to do it no matter what. It makes you uncomfortable, but if you stop doing it, what do you stand to risk? And in Mormonism, you lose your family connections, you lose your community, you lose your existential standing, you lose love of God. I mean, yes, and for people on the outside, they would say that's all perceived loss, but perception is reality. And so when you believe that this is what's going to happen to you, it changes things. And then, yeah, I agree with Latter Daily Digest. No informed consent, or keyword full disclosure. And then this is just heartbreaking from Kat. I have heard this so many times from clients. And so I just kind of want to echo this. It says, I went through on my wedding day, and by the time it was all over, I was in tears as I was being escorted to the sealing room. The temple worker thought I was in tears because the spirit was so strong. And yeah, this is bringing up hard memories. So Kat, if this is really difficult for you, I would be happy to chat with you. Afterwards, you just have to email us at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. That comes directly to me. And I would absolutely be willing to talk with you about that. And if at any time anything gets really difficult for you, please, a lot of people are calling the 988 a suicide prevention line. And yes, it absolutely is that, but you don't have to feel like you're going to harm yourself or somebody else to utilize it. They will talk to you about something if it is feeling overwhelming. That is part of this. We don't want to utilize it as just a mental health counseling thing. But if you are truly feeling overwhelmed and you need somebody to just be like, okay, I've got to talk to somebody, this is coming up and it's overwhelming, they are there for you. And they can help refer you to a counselor that can then take over that long-term care. So there is absolutely nothing to be sorry about, Kat, at all. This can be incredibly emotionally overwhelming and triggering for so many people, especially when the temple has not been a positive place for you. So if you need somebody to talk to, please email us, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So
yeah, what's triggering is that the church doesn't allow for the possibility of someone having a negative experience in the temple. Like, you're crying in the temple, okay, you can assume it was just a spiritual experience, but can you not ask? Or you say, I'm really uncomfortable at the veil. Is someone like, why can't they just say, oh, what makes you uncomfortable? No, they jump right to, well, obviously you're not righteous enough to enjoy this. Like, it's such a shaming statement to just put you down, instead of just being curious. Like, oh, what was it about the veil that was so uncomfortable for you? Oh, well, it's the fact that some man was sticking his hand through the veil and I didn't know who he was, and I got to put my hand on his shoulder. You know what? That was kind of uncomfortable for me too. I get that. You'll kind of work through it. It is a representation of the Lord, and of course, it comes with its, this is the earth, so it comes with its problems. But then you have a conversation about what's going on, rather than a shaming moment. That it's so. And you know what? I'm sure some people do that. I'm sure that there's people in the temple who do have that conversation, because there's a lot of good people there. But
Yeah.
it's not the culture that is fostered in the temple.
Right. It's not the norm. And then Kat says one of the worst or one of the worst things for them is that the day before she was telling her husband and family how she would never agree to obey, and nobody, I mean, what a great opportunity to say, actually, that's part of the temple covenant.
Let's talk
Because
about this.
there's nothing about the things you're promising that are secret or sacred. It's the handshakes and the tokens and
Right.
whatnot. It's not what what covenants you're going to be making. And, Kat, I feel you on this. My dad was horrible and my mom obeyed him forever and never stood up for me when my father was abusive. And so I too was very nervous. And I remember saying, I'll obey. And then it was, as my husband hearkens to the Lord. And for me, I went, well, anytime he doesn't do it the way I want him to, that means he's not hearkening to the Lord. And in my mind, it was like protecting the kids, don't yell at the kids and whatnot. Like it wasn't, Mason's over there laughing. It wasn't meant for me. Like my intention was not, if it's not the way I want things, it's not the way the Lord wants it. Rather, my brain was, if he's yelling at my kids, if he's doing to my kids what my father did to me, I don't have to obey and I will stand up for my kids. But yeah, that's big. So
I'm glad that you had that in your mind, though, like as an out. Like for me, this was not quite exactly the same thing, but I was, my parents were divorced when I was 4 because of abuse. And so in my mind, I always had this out for myself as like the moment he hits anybody, then I will go. But that was like, I was married for 7 years to someone that I wasn't in love with because I believed that was the right thing to do. And there was a lot of reasons that I should have gotten divorced, but because he never hit me or any human in our family, because he did hit the dog, I didn't feel like there was any reason to leave or end my marriage. So anyway, but at least there was there's a bar that you set for yourself,
Oh yeah. I mean, Mason and I got married with, we're not going to parent or treat each other the way either of our parents parented or treated each other. And I think that's, one of the great things that we've been able to do differently. And I love this comment from Coco. Excuse me, I just, enacted slitting my throat and holding my bowels and holding my heart in my hand. And this makes me very uncomfortable. And then her answer from the temple patron was, you're a heathen.
Is that an exact quote? Did you say that, Coco? That's just super interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
That's crazy.
So Coco, the question is, did you actually say that? Like, is that as close to an exact quote as
Somebody
get it?
Somebody mentioned earlier, not understanding the whole cupping thing. And what I was going to say was kind of snarky, but here it comes up as like, oh yeah, that's just to prepare you to catch your bowels or your testicles when we cut them off because you told somebody about them. It's just like, yeah, like we don't know. There's nothing like the cupping thing doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have any connection to what we do, but we can't talk about it. It's from God, so we don't talk about that crap. Why are you even asking, you heathen, kind of thing?
Right. And then exact obedience, it causes people to not question, and they just have these uncomfortable thoughts like you were talking about of ignoring your amygdala.
Yeah. Well, and Coco says, no, I would never have said that. Those were my thoughts. But one of the things that I love from Brene Brown is she talks about the story that you're telling yourself. And usually the story that you're telling yourself is, it's a survival instinct. It's your amygdala scanning your brain for negative memories. And so sometimes those intrusive thoughts that just won't go away is your amygdala's way of talking to you. It's your own internal self-dialogue that is, kind of like that. Oh my goodness, this is terrifying. If I bring this up, what's going to happen? Oh, they're going to shame me. They're going to call me these names. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. And so you're going to see that. And so if you are interested in learning more about the brain, you can see some of our earlier episodes, and then upcoming here more towards the end of January or February, we are going to be doing our Unpacking with Sarah Westbrook. And we're going to really focus on the neuroscience and how these things are going on and what you can do to take care of them as a psychoeducation. As a psychoeducation content there. So, and
Good
yes,
stuff.
Coco, I completely agree that if the Mormons knew the Mason rituals, they would know more about what they're actually doing in the temple. But because the church has changed it, unless you're willing to look at non-Mormon material, you're just not going to understand what's really going on. So, alrighty.
So Kat says, I had no family there because I was the only member, so I was by myself and kept looking for my fiance to help, but no one would meet my gaze. As I kept looking around, they all just acted like this was completely normal.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah, I mean, because of course you can take an uncomfortable experience, and if you're with friends, you're with family, you can tolerate those kind of things. We've all been through uncomfortable things that aren't necessarily unhealthy.
Groupthink, beware, groupthink.
But also, yeah, beware, because if something is uncomfortable, then we don't want to just write it off. We go through uncomfortable things that we have to learn to deal with, but we also go through uncomfortable things that maybe we need to stand up and say, I don't think so. This isn't okay. I'm not doing this. And it's really hard to do that in this situation. You're not really set up for walking out of the temple.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So any other comments from America or Julia on this before we're ready to go ahead and move forward?
Well, I would just add to that. Like, so in my first temple experience, I went through the endowment and came out, and my family all was there, and they were all looking at me like, yeah, this is the interesting experience, right? Welcome. You're now part of the fold. So it was kind of like, I just went through this crazy experience, and I have so many questions, but yeah, let's just normalize it. Everything's good. Everything's okay. Like, okay. All right. So I think that the reason that they do have all the family come and be there for you is to kind of normalize it. Like, yeah, we all went through this too. You're now part of the club. Welcome in. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What
My
18-year-old
family
boy is going to say, y'all crazy?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and my
Exactly.
family was kind of like, oh, there's nothing to see here. It's time for us to work on getting to the dinner afterwards, because we were having like
Mhm.
we were having a great big family dinner. So like I came through the celestial room and nobody even asked me what I thought. There was not a moment. It was like, all right, time for us to head out
thumbs
for
up,
dinner.
let's go.
And I think that one of the things that's kind of funny about that is my family has a huge like genetic or whatever. We are emotional eaters to the nth degree. Like we like our food. And so I almost feel like it was like, all right, let's get out to dinner so you can self-soothe after that. And then I'm gonna close out with this as we begin to move on to the next slide. Is we've got, I think today's generation would yell, what the fuck am I slitting my throat? I am not doing that, bruh. And yes,
I would hope so, but like at the same time, people did this in the past, and
I was
yeah.
total groupthink, right? When I went through the temple, it was because I was getting ready to go on my mission. I wasn't interested in another option. Like I totally wanted to be on a mission. I went for no other reasons than I wanted to be there because I felt like it was the right thing to do. So there was total groupthink. It would not have mattered what had gone on in the temple. I was there. I was going.
Yeah.
I was going to get married to somebody in the temple. There was no other option. Doesn't matter what uncomfortable is going on. This has to happen. Total groupthink. And so I don't remember having any kind of an emotional experience about this. I remember it being a positive spiritual experience, but there was no emotional experience because there was no room for that. This is just another cog in the wheel. This is just another check mark on the board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So what do we have next?
So you can go to the next one, but hang on. I just wanted to say really fast because it popped into my head. So we have the early washings and anointings in 1836, and then the earliest temple ceremonies were in 42. And so women weren't allowed to be in the temple until 1843. So I just think that was really interesting how women weren't allowed to go until later. So I just wanted to add that in there because you mentioned that Masons are only for men. And that's how the temple was at the beginning too.
So were the women allowed to go into the temple for at least like the ceiling stuff, or was that not part of it?
No, the ceilings weren't
didn't come about
until
43.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that's also really interesting because Joseph Smith was taking women before that ceiling power was restored. So,
or even before he had
or before.
Right,
I
and
think
Emma
one of
wasn't the first person that he got sealed to either. So
No, she
yeah.
was like the 20.
She was the 26th, I think, as far as the as Todd Compton's numbers go. I think she was like the 26th wife. But also he was taking women that were not endowed. So that's I don't understand what he's doing there. But
Nobody
anyway,
does. Nobody
It
does.
doesn't
You just
matter.
brush it under the rug and keep going.
It doesn't
And
matter if they're endowed; they have boobs and a vagina. That's all that really matters.
Well, yeah. And he was taking the women before he received the revelation of DNC
so lots of
123.
problems.
So
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about the penalties now. I just want to talk about if you'll go to the next slide, Alex. So do you want to read this one?
So today there are signs and tokens that are given and shown in the temple ceremony. The temple patrons are instructed at different points in the ceremony to hold their right arm at one point, the left arm to the square, and at other times holding the other arm down with the fingers close together with the thumb extended or in the cupping position. These signs are not explained at any point during the ceremony.
So yeah, no matter how many times you go, they don't explain it. You just, in fact, I remember thinking like, what if I'm putting my hand on the Bible and I'm holding the Liahona, or like I had all these weird things that's like to make it okay.
And I thought this maybe had something to do with like baby blessings, like how they stand in a circle and they hold the baby like this. I was like, maybe that's related. But no, it's not related.
Yeah. And so if you go to the next slide. So before 1990, the penalties were much different. Instead of holding their right arm through the square, the patrons would take their hand and slide it across their throat. And then additionally, when the hand was next to them facing, so they would slide it across their stomach. And then as far as I know, and I re-listened to the 1990 or the earlier temple ceremonies, I don't think they explain it. They just said at the peril of your life. They don't explain that this is a knife and that this is like cutting you and then you're holding your bowels or your organs. I don't think they explain those at all. So again, no explanation is given at this point. And if you go to the next slide.
She's wearing the veil backwards. Oh. Not her, the first one.
Do you want to do this one? So this is what it was in the early 1800s.
Okay. Well, and she looks glorious. Look at her. She's got this. Anyway, the breaking of this latter oath was to be followed by the most horrible penalties. Torture of the most excruciating kind was to be inflicted upon anyone who should disregard this oath. His bowels should be torn from him while he was yet alive. His throat should then be cut from ear to ear, his heart and his tongue cut out, and in the world to come he should inherit eternal damnation. There should be, nor could be, no chance of salvation for him. These promised penalties are by no means mere forms of words given merely to add impressiveness to the ceremony. The blood atonement shows that they are carried out, and hundreds of cases could be cited in addition to those already given to prove that the endowment house penalties are by no means dead letters in the Mormon Church law. The cutting of every Gentile and apostate throat and the sending to hell across lots that have been so openly and emphatically urged from the stand by Brigham Young and others is only a public expression of the mysteries of the endowment oaths. All of these penalties have their roots in Masonry.
Okay, so that quote comes from Analyze's book as well, and she goes on to list people who were blood atoned. And I've heard recently a scholar said that there was only like 2 instances of blood atonement. So it'd be really interesting to actually to follow up with her list and see how they perished.
How they compare. Yeah. Wow.
Well, John D. Lee mentions a lot of people dying by blood atonement, so I don't believe it's only 2.
Right. Anyway, so they're being told what these signs are, that they're literally cutting themselves and their hearts and their throats, and anyway, so they knew then, and then it's been washed out, even though we still have. It's almost like we're holding the knife. Anyway, so the penalties are still there. There's just no information about it at all.
I like that this woman in the picture is holding an actual knife.
Yeah, I think that's just a rendition for a newspaper, but I don't.
Yeah, when you first pulled it up, I was like, wait, is that like Bellatrix Lestrange's wand or something? And then I said, oh no, it's a knife, Sarah.
Also so I see it in the comments, and I didn't make a slide for this, but before they had the words Peleal, when one of the, and I don't know if this is bad, but we're already talking about penalties. One of the signs or the tokens, I can't remember what is the words, the signs, Peleal, but then it was changed to, oh God, hear the words of my mouth. So there was a lot of dispute there about what that meant, whether it was like the meaning, whether it meant hear the voice of my mouth, or whether it meant something totally different. So I think that's why they just changed it to, oh Lord, hear the words of my mouth.
Yeah. So Thad, Julia and America are in the process of putting all of this on their website. Is that correct, Julia and America?
Yeah.
So that you can find a lot of these things.
So a lot of the pictures that I put in this presentation come from different sources and different things. there's a lot of different sources that I'm pulling from. David Berger, I think is how it says you say his name. He has a book about it's called Mysteries of Godliness, and he goes through the temple changes. And Analyze's book is really good. Mary Eddy, these are two women that left Mormonism and they wrote exposés.
Analyza Young's book, Wife Number 19, is really fun to read too.
She's a very good writer.
Very interesting to read.
Yeah, so there's just a lot of different locations, but yeah, I'm working to put this all in the website so that it'll be all in one place.
Right. So this Charles person is, I don't know you personally, Charles, but you're my favorite because of your Let's Go chant in front of the General Conference Center. That would be a blast. That is totally the way that I respond to things. If you don't believe me, ask Mason. He'll tell you I'm a little snarky rebel. But Charles says that the Paleo is Adam's language, or Adamic, meaning, oh God, hear the words of my mouth. So basically what we've done is we took it out of Adam's language and put it into English.
And this is according to Joseph. This is Joseph's version of Adam's language. So yes, thank you for pointing that out. That
have you guys?
The coolest thing about inventing a language is no one can question you, right?
Yeah.
Until the Rosetta Stone comes out, and then they can
until they
question you.
prove that
the
Abraham, Book of Abraham has nothing to do with Book of Abraham.
Right.
Yep. Well,
that was really inconvenient. That was an inconvenient discovery.
Yeah.
Well, and I like Joseph Smith's font, like his alphabet. Like we should make that a keyboard font on phones nowadays, since it's just the English alphabet. With extra decorations.
Yeah.
There you go. Two from Coco right there. In the circle, you're holding your hand up in the cupping position, but they don't tell you that before 1990, you were slashing your heart out and now holding it. I told you it was to hold your bowels, right? Didn't I say that? Man,
yeah, you said that, yeah.
That's a good guess.
He's saying heart.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I know. It was a guess.
Yeah. Okay, so if you go to the next slide.
So Thad, they have a website already. So Julia in America, if you want to give that shout out for him real quick, and then go ahead.
So it's analyzingmormonism.com. So there's a lot of stuff there already. It's just this part of it. I don't have the temple, this specific stuff in there yet. I do talk about the other parts of it, like the Oath of Vengeance and things like that. But I'll be adding this here in the next day or so.
All righty. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now I just want to talk about the veil really fast. So if you go to the next slide. So today, temple patrons are brought before a veil at the end of the ceremony and questioned concerning the signs and tokens they received. And so I guess, and people have said that they no longer hand out the tokens during the ceremony, but just at the veil. And then they are to repeat the signs and tokens at the veil while they obtain a new one. So that's what goes on today. And then if you go to the next slide, one thing that I thought was really interesting. Do you want to go ahead and read some of this?
Sure. So we're talking about the veil. They say, who says this?
This is probably Analyza. Most of these quotes come from her.
She says, the room we were in was divided by a muslin partition in which was a door. In this door was a hole just large enough to pass the hand through. And over this hole was a curtain of muslin. The persons who were behind this muslin partition, which was supposed to represent the veil, were invisible to us, although they could see us distinctly. A man approached the door as if seeking admittance, and the Apostle Peter, appearing at the opening, asked who was there and what was wanted. Sounds very familiar. He was told that someone wished to enter. The applicant was told to come near, and as he approached, hands came through the opening in the door and cut a mysterious mark on each breast of the man's garment, another over the abdomen, still another over the right knee. The garments of all the applicants were treated in the same mysterious manner, and the women were told to copy them in their own home when they got home. It was also commanded them that whenever their other garments were made, these marks must be placed on them.
So yeah, I just wanted to show the difference between the veil then and the veil now. So the veil, you're just passing these signs and tokens, but back then you had your garments, and then they marked them there. Not the women, because I think probably because of
nipple protection.
Yeah,
they didn't do it then for nipple protection.
Right. So, but I think that's super interesting where they cut garment marks right there at the veil. They had, some people say there was scissors. There's other different sources that say all this.
Some of them say that it would cut literally their skin too.
Right. And that's one of the things that they say why it was changed is because it was just hurting the individuals. And also, it's probably really
were they supposed to go home and stitch it up, and that's why it's then stitched?
Yeah, they were told to go home and sew it. So yeah. So yeah, I just thought that was super interesting. And this is a drawing of Joseph's original garments. They look very different now. My grandpa, for a while, he would always wear the wrist to ankle just like this. So I thought that was interesting.
My grandmother still wears the one with the bum slit, and I know that because she loaned me her garments once when I bled through mine on a temple trip, and that was the weirdest experience ever.
Oh boy.
It'd be really like a very breezy, refreshing.
Very, very breezy, and I'm not having that slit in the back did not stay closed in my modern day pants or dress or whatever. I mean, those ones probably would have been better to reduce chronic yeast infections because of the air circulation in them versus the ones that I was told to wear. They also would have made it a lot easier to leave them on during showers and whatnot, which I know for a while the garment was not supposed to be removed even like for showers or sex or anything.
Sex,
so I mean,
it would have been really easy to have sex in this
right.
thing.
Right. No skin to skin contact except through the slits. So
I was going to say, I think you pointed out sort of in a way, I don't think garments are at all designed with women in mind because it's like you'd mentioned about getting infections and things like that.
What?
Yeah.
I had so many issues with my garments. I eventually ended up wearing regular underwear under them because I just could not. They just were awful. And I had to tell my ex-husband, look, this is the way it's got to be because I keep getting issues, and he just had to suck it up.
Yeah, my Mormon bishop, who was also my OBGYN / infertility specialist, after the third or fourth time of going to him, he was like, you can just take them off on occasion and just go without. And I was like, oh, thank God. But I had to have the Mormon OBGYN tell me that, not the, yeah. Anyway, all right.
Okay, so if you go to the next slide, so here, these next two are just quotes from different women that talk about how they recognize that there's a lot of ties to Masonry. Of course, these are women. They are not Masons. They don't know the ties. But then you have others, and I didn't put the slides in here, but you have other people like Heber C. Kimball talking about how Brigham's teaching was that Masonry was corrupted, and then what the Mormons are doing is true, actual, I don't know how to say that, true Masonry. And I think she talks about that.
Celestial Masonry is one of the things that we saw.
Yeah. So Analyza talks about how she said all good which it's just interesting where she's like, oh, people say it's claimed that the mysterious rites were taken from Masonry, but she's like, that can't be true because all good Masons would repudiate it and its teachings. So I don't know. I just think that's interesting that they're noticing these, and
that's some mental gymnastics to deal with some cognitive dissonance and utilizing some cognitive bias there. I just find that that's pretty normal though for Joseph Smith. Like he took something from somebody else and then quote unquote improved upon it and then claimed that it was the one true way, which is also a narcissistic tactic. So
yeah, and if you go to the next one, there's another quote. I think it's from Mary Eddy Smith. She says a similar thing. She says the endowments were made to conform to those of Masonry, but she says this is a mere blind, and the real object of these mysteries this mystic forms in no way connect or is barred from Masonry. So she's denying it, but she's heard it. But then you have the leaders who are saying, yes, this is Masonry, but this is like you said, the celestial Masonry. So I just thought that was interesting. And even now,
Mary wouldn't have known that though because she was female.
Exactly.
She wasn't allowed in a Masonic temple. It would have been something that only the men who were also Masons would have known. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. That I thought that was interesting, and how members now can hear. Like even as a member, I heard that there was ties to Masonry. Of course, I don't even know what that means. I don't know anything about Masonry, or even as a member of the church. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting that even back then they seemed to understand, or the world seemed to understand that it was Masonry. The next slide is the last one.
And then Coco says the temple ceremony really pissed off the Masons because the Mormons were going through too fast and they eventually let in the women, which is why there's that theory that many of the people in the mob that killed Joseph Smith were Masons, because in that day it was a very real thing to murder Masons who disclosed the secrets of Masonry. And I would say that like in my time as Mormonism, it was, that true Masonry came from the Solomon temples. And then over time, they fucked it up. And then Joseph Smith fixed it.
And then the Masons will tell you now that that's not true, that they know that it's not from Solomon's temple. So yeah, but that is super interesting. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so this is my last slide, and I just wanted to talk about how long it took. So today, the endowment ceremony, I think, if I'm not mistaken, lasts somewhere between 2 hours to 1.5 hours. I think that's still similar. And then Mary Eddy Smith said the time occupied in this initiation is about 10 hours. 2 days in the week are set apart for this purpose, and sometimes groups after groups succeed each other. And so one of the reasons I just thought that was super interesting, 10 hours. David Berger and then other researchers, even Heber C. Kimball says that the time was really only 2 hours. What took them so long was that there usually was only one person accepting through the veil, so it just took a long time to funnel everybody through. So yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, conferences 10 hours. I can't imagine going through the temple for 10 hours. And often people would stay the night and then continue the temple ceremonies the next day. So
stay the night in the temple, by the way, was totally a thing.
Yeah, there was bedrooms in the temple, and they stayed the night, and often with their polygamists. I think Heber C. Kimball stayed the night one time with two of his wives, and Gordon Hinckley stays with his kids and his wife.
You never talked about how they supposedly drink wine with the devil.
Oh, I didn't mention that. Yeah, there's a part going back, there was a part in there where they pretend, or they're running around with the devil and taking the fruit. There's a part where he's saying, I can't remember exactly the words he says, but he was like, "Oh, come, let us drink together." And then so he passes around this little wooden bowl cup thing of wine, and everyone drinks from it. So I just thought that was funny and interesting.
And there we have stories of them having parties, like dancing in the temple as well. The temple was just a really much more,
which is why 10 hours was doable. It was like a grown-up fun time party, and bedrooms and all the other. Yes. So I love this from Coco. When Joseph Smith was, quote unquote, murdered, I'm going to say murdered. When he was at the window looking for help at the jail, he knew that there were Masons in the crowd below. And then he called out, "Am I not my brother's keeper?" or whatever it is, which was the Mason call, and they ignored him.
That's my understanding is, yeah.
Yeah, probably.
There's no help for the widow's son or something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, she's right on the money. Coco he called out for Masons as a sign of help or call for help, and he of course was not answered. So
probably because he was soliciting all the women for sexual.
Maybe that, maybe the abuse of power, maybe all the things that he did, which were all terrible.
Right. My guess is that every human in that mob had their own individual reasoning and what they were focusing on for why to be there, for sure.
I will say that we do not, or at least speaking for us, we do not condone. I don't think Joseph should have died. It's not right to take people's lives without having, period. He should have gone to court and had this all figured out. But yeah.
Also, I agree. I'm not for killing because of stuff, although I am 100% for imprisoning men who are coercing minors into the bedroom.
Agreed.
For sure. So I mean, not just the printing press. I think that if Joseph Smith was alive today, he would be behind bars serving multiple sentences due to the things that he did.
The thing is, Sarah, the sad thing is that he'd been doing polygamy for years and years and years, but it wasn't until he burned down the printing press, had control of an entire city, and had an army that political influence, that men took an interest in what he was doing. Because as long as he was just abusing women.
Yeah, Lindsay Hansen-Park, who does the Year of Polygamy, she pointed that out too. She says it's really sad that it wasn't just polygamy that caused them to have a problem with Joseph. It was when their power started to be taken as men.
Right. So. Well, and unfortunately, I work in a field where one of the main reasons that victims don't report is because in order to get justice in our court system today, it is a grueling, re-traumatizing process. So today, we still need to revamp and fix that. However, today, victims do have their voices heard better, I would say, than in any generation previous to us, which is why we need to really rally around the victims. I also want to point out that, unfortunately for men in today's society, you are guilty until proven innocent. in these things. And so, yes, our system still has our governmental system here in the United States still has a very long way to go, both for those that are victimized and those that are accused. And yes, for me, the consensual polygamy does not bother me about Joseph Smith. It's the non-consensual, deceitful side of it. My heart breaks for Emma. If she had known, how would she have responded differently? Would she have responded differently? How would that have gone down? I'm a huge proponent of consent and honesty, transparency, integrity. For me, he should have been behind bars as soon as it was with minors. And unfortunately, Fanny Alger, there's several. It's several minors. And so, we could go on all day about the ickiness of his sexual predatory behaviors, his perpetration. He was, and I want to make it very clear, in today's vernacular, he was not a pedophile because he was targeting women and girls that were past sexual maturity, but predator and perpetrator absolutely do fit. And then Ellen, I love this comment. Modern day consensual polygamy is fine because you're adults, you're consenting. I would say adult consenting to polygamy, fine. And it's the consent piece. And then I just want to add to that, the age of consent needs to be when your frontal cortex is developed enough that you can actually understand the consequences and not from a pressured point of view. We call that ethical non-monogamy. It is definitely something that I would say, look into because yes, Ellen, a child cannot consent. And, for females, your frontal cortex, the way that we understand it today, is not done growing and fully developing until your very late teens, early 20s. And then for a man, it's like 23 to 26 or something along those lines. Don't quote me on that. I would have to do this. And, Coco, look how well it worked out for the sister wives. We look at relationship failure as maybe being a bad thing. But what I love about the sister wives is that when the women were ready to leave, they could, and they did. And Joseph Smith's wives did not have that option. So when you watch Sister Wives, it's a very complicated reality television show. I wouldn't want to, condemn any of them because they were all consenting adults. But the thing that I admire most about the women from Sister Wives is that when they were ready to leave, they did.
I don't think it's fair to say that they couldn't have left, but certainly there were lots of obstacles to being able to leave that situation. Like, we know that some of Brigham Young's wives certainly left him. There were people that escaped, quote unquote, escaped polygamy. The reality is that that's not exclusive to polygamy. Like, if you were a woman in the 1830s, 1840s, 50s, so on, if you wanted a divorce, it wasn't really your right. Like, you were essentially property. And that's a sick place to be. It was worse with polygamy. It was worse in a theocracy when you're essentially kind of forced into it.
That's what happened with Analyza Young. She tried to divorce Brigham Young, and initially they granted her a divorce, and he granted alimony because at the time he was like a millionaire. But actually, he took her back to court because he proved that their marriage wasn't legal, so she had no legal claim on him.
So essentially, he won that court case where he didn't
have to pay her anything because legally she wasn't his wife.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. And then I love this, this question from Charles, which is it consent if you hold the false belief that it is necessary for salvation or exaltation? Right. And I would say, when you are in a system of mind control, brainwashing, and those types of things, I would say there's partial consent. Like, it gets really sticky. Consent is not black or white. We definitely have the things that are in the, the black zone. No means no, those types of things. But there's so much context here. I would say that if you want to know about consent, Mason, give me the name of that author again. I think it was Jessica Fern.
Jessica Fern.
Jessica
It'll be in
Fern.
the notes too for everybody.
Yeah, so Jessica Fern is the author of, and I would recommend Polysecure first, and then Polywise second. Yes, her audience is for people interested in practicing some form of consensual non-monogamy. But as you read through her books, the way that she approaches consent has value for monogamous relationships as well. And she talks about what does consent actually look like. And one of the things that she talks about is that if there's one partner pressuring another partner to practice consensual non-monogamy, then it's not consent. You're looking at pressure. And I would extend that to any organization or belief system where there's that pressure of you have to do this, that really muddies the waters there. And then, yeah, I think that with Coco, same with tithing. If you don't pay, you can't go to the temple, no eternity with your spouse. And so, yeah, we're starting to talk about how the temple holds a monopoly on your salvation. If you don't do it their way, you don't get into heaven. And this is really where, as we educate people, you can recognize the all or nothing thinking pattern is very, very dangerous. And I don't like all-inclusive words. I use them on accident all the time because, they're used around me all the time. And I try and catch myself. In this case, I would say that all or nothing thinking is almost always dangerous. And by almost always, I'm like 99.99999% all or nothing is dangerous. So yes, consent is informed. Uninformed consent is not consent. And I do.
Yes.
I do like that. And I would say, I'm going to actually kind of close out, with this. Let's go ahead and wrap today's show up a little bit. Ellen, you have really taken our intent of today's show in the sense of the Mormon Temple. It could be a very beautiful experience for many people, but I would say that most practicing Mormons are consenting to go to the temple, but it is uninformed consent. Mason, you and I really kind of dug into this, the uninformed consent in our temple no prep show that aired live. I think that was last weekend that we did that one.
No, it's gonna be live this coming Monday, tomorrow.
Yep. And it will be dropped on the podcast tomorrow. So anywhere that you're listening to podcasts that shows up, or almost everywhere that you are listening to your podcast is going to show up. But yes, I would say that uninformed consent is kind of how the LDS Church does things. It's how they do things with baptism. It's how they're doing things in the temple. It's how they're doing things even with the way they're spending your tithing money, So when you are looking at practices within Mormonism, one of the reasons that Mason and I speak out so much about this, please correct me if I'm wrong, Julia in America, I'm going to put words in your mouth, so correct them if I'm wrong. But one of the reasons that we are doing what we are doing is to bring information to you. And we are really hoping that those who are willing to look and engage with this contact, ours and others, there are so many people in this Mormon space that are working really hard to bring you accurate historical information as you are engaging that. Our hope is that you can be informed so that the choices that you are making are intentional. So yes, I love this comment. I feel like we need to make this our motto for today's show, which is consent. In order to consent, you need to be informed. Uninformed consent is not consent. So Mason, do you have anything else you want to say in closing? And then after you're done, I would open that up to Julia and America, and then we will go from there.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I would add is that if you look at most medical forms, it does not say consent. It says informed consent. I mean, there's an issue. Like in anesthesia surgery, which is where I work, we tell you all kinds of stuff that could happen because we have to. I mean, if you go into surgery and for some reason you don't think there's any possibility that you could die, we haven't done our job, right? You need to know that that is a possibility. Although incredibly remote, it is a possibility. People do die from those procedures. People do have things that happen that we can't fix or that will cause pain or trauma, things like that. It's all a part of what we do. And they sign the form because either they think they know or they just want the surgery or whatever, but it's right there in black and white that you can read. If you choose not to read it, fine, that's on you, but it's right there. You sign the paper saying, I've read this, I know, I understand this information. And there's nothing like that.
Well, in
Not
every
in
surgery,
Mormonism at all.
yeah, I was going to say every surgery that I've ever had, and there's a lot of them because of my infertility and whatnot, is that I had at least 2 to 3 people sit down with me and go over the risks, what to expect, and what to expect
Yeah.
as I healed. And then also, this is the phone number to call if you have any questions afterwards with medical professionals that are willing to spend as much time with me as I need to feel comfortable in providing post-operative care for myself. There's
Yes.
always a place I can go. Nothing's secret, or it's not supposed to be. So I shouldn't say nothing,
Right.
but it's not supposed to be.
Right.
All right. Thank you,
And
Mason.
That's so good. And so when I went through the temple prep class, the only thing I remember that was super helpful is that they mentioned that the veils sometimes are opaque. And she said to make sure you get one that is see-through because your experience will be a lot better. And I, on my first time there, didn't have the choice because they just handed me the packet that I was renting and it was opaque. But at least I knew, oh, okay, I'm having a different experience because there are different veils. But it was like a scary, scary thing to be behind an opaque veil while we're doing chants and stuff. And but like that's the helpful thing I learned in my temple prep class, right? And like not any of this helpful stuff.
At least
and when
it's
you said-
something, right?
Yeah.
At least
Yeah,
it's
well-
something. It's not enough, but it's something.
Yeah. And when you said veil, I thought at first you meant like the veil to go into the celestial room. And I was like, oh yeah, if it's a little opaque, you can see the person on the other side. So that way they hopefully don't grope your boob. But you were talking about the veil over your face. Yeah, that absolutely. I'm going to say opaque for both. Choose opaque for both. If you want to go after all you've learned.
You mean not opaque?
Not opaque.
Yes.
Something you can see through better.
See through.
Yeah.
Yes. And Coco brings up, so Coco in the comments just said, now the women do not even have to veil their faces. That has been
It's
removed.
really a good
Yeah,
change,
that's a really good change. We actually, there's a TikTok video that she made where we kind of remade the experience of being behind a veil in your first temple experience. And all you can hear is like the temple kind of words in the background, but mostly you hear your own breathing. And it's really trippy. It
Like a
screws me up
panicky-
every time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like a panicky,
Wow.
like breathing, like, and like it's through the veil. Oh, that's my favorite TikTok video she's made because it's terrifying and it's so accurate.
I always used it to smell my breath and make sure that I need a Tic Tac when I go sit back down.
I just wanted to say that like had I known as a member that about all these changes and what we were doing, I don't think I would have agreed to do these at all. I don't think I would have sliced my throat. And one of the things that I did covenant to do, and maybe this is reflective of like groupthink, but one of the things that they say in there is that you covenant to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You don't covenant to God or Jesus, to the church. And that really bothered me. I was like, I don't like this. I don't want to covenant. The temple is about Jesus and God, not about this organization.
Well, it should be, but it's
that's
not.
that's what I was told it was about. But I went ahead and made that covenant, and that was really uncomfortable to me to do that. And yeah.
Coco says she used the veil to blow her nose in private. Oh, and one thing I wanted to flash back really quick. We were talking about Joseph Smith. So where is it?
Can you just say it?
Yeah. Okay. So we were talking about why he got murdered, right? And I think it was Coco said that it was because the newspaper was going to print his sins about polygamy, and that's why he burned it down. That actually they had printed it, and you can read it. It's called the Nauvoo Expositor. We actually shared it in the book form, and it's very interesting. It's been proven that everything that they accused him of was real, and you can Nauvoo Expositor. It's really
that's one our company has published, so you can find that on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So
Anyway, just wanted to add that.
Worth reading.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So
well, thank you for letting us come on and give this little history of the temple.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we've got some requests. I have received a couple of emails. People are wondering if you can make your PowerPoint available on your website, like the whole thing.
Sure.
So I'm going to leave that with you. That came in a private email to the Daisy Girl Communications email. So you all can do with that. It is not, I will say that this PowerPoint does not belong to Unpacking Mormonism. And so if you are wanting that, you're going to need to contact Julia and America through their website at analyzingmormonism.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, or Julia at Analyzing Mormonism is another way to just email me. But yeah, and I'll just say this is not every change. I mean, we've even been talking about other changes that I didn't list. So this is just you could go on for hours and hours, and we have. I mean, it's been 3.5 hours.
Yeah, we've gone on for 3.5 hours talking about
all
this.
the stuff that has been changed. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that, it's almost like the CES letter. He started out with his initial, and now what we're getting is like, oh, and this, oh, and this. And so, yes, if you are interested in getting your hands on this PowerPoint, you will need to reach out to Julia and America, and there that is. And we will absolutely make sure that those links are available, and those websites are available in our show notes here at Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. So as we close up today, we want to say thank you so much. We've had a great turnout to our live presentation, which is amazing since we didn't really announce it, which is the way Unpacking Mormonism goes. We fly by the seat of our pants because did you see how many kids I have? This right here is the reason that Mason and I set a time and never make it on time, because we have a beautiful humongo family, because I'm Mormon, and the more kids you have, the better your chances are in the celestial kingdom.
Exactly.
So, no, I'm going to be honest right now. I would not give any of them back. I just wish that my consent to bring them into my home had been a little bit more informed. So I'm going to take the quote that Ellen gave us earlier about informed consent. So just a reminder to the Unpacking Mormonism audience, we are reducing how often our shows are coming out on the podcast because we are in the process of broadening our audience to a non-religious audience. And so we are going to be releasing Unpacking with Sarah episodes that are 100% focused on the psycho educational piece of what the hell is my brain doing and how can I actually get better with real life tips and tools and tricks that you can use right now. So it's not therapy, because when I call it that, it's a problem. It is psychoeducational. And as we build that platform, we will also be publishing a book with the same name and providing you with the worksheets and things that I actually use in my clinic here that I have found to be incredibly effective for my patients. I want to make sure that we are making that available to the general public because counseling is super expensive. If you need help, we want to definitely, if you need help or somebody to talk to, you can email us at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. I can help you find resources in your local community for a lot of that. If you are in crisis or you are feeling like you're going to harm yourself or others, please reach out to the National Suicide and Mental Health Crisis Hotline at 988. I have used it myself. I got super triggered about a year ago and sat in the bathtub, bawling my eyes out and texting the 988 hotline, and they were amazing. So thank you so much to my colleagues in the trenches for reaching out for those of us that are in struggle. I want to say I want you to choose your 11 minutes. And for those who are wondering what that is, we will be talking about that in the near future. Too often when we talk about suicide or self-harming, we talk about all of the people who have passed. And instead, I want to talk about choose to talk to somebody for 11 minutes. 11 minutes is the magical number that reduces completed suicide substantially. And there's a lot of research that goes into that. So please talk to somebody for 11 minutes as you work to physiologically soothe yourself. And stay tuned at Unpacking with Sarah Westbrook for more information. We are really excited to be bringing that programming to you today. So thank you so much, Julia and America. It is always so much fun to work with you. And Mason and I are super privileged to live so close to you. When we get together, we talk way too much. And I'm not going to say for too long. It's probably not even too much. We just have an absolute freaking good time. And I absolutely love the work that you are doing. I am not a historian. I am definitely a behavioral health, mental health specialist. And the history work that you are doing is absolutely phenomenal. And so thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Any final questions or comments from our audience, please feel free to reach out to us on our individual platforms or our individual email addresses or websites that we have shared with you today. And as always, thank you so much to Alex Vidalis, our producer behind the scenes, for making us look and sound amazing. We love the work that you do. And we love y'all. So till next time, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.